Okay, good evening. I think we're all here, gentlemen. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Can.
Yep. Fantastic. Okay, good evening and welcome to the 10th Cadets Live presentation of this season, I guess you could say. Big thanks to Tom Onks, who started this some time ago. And this is our second visual webinar over the last 2 weeks. And what a lineup we have tonight. Absolutely incredible. My name is John Bilby. I'm the current Cadets visual designer. We have Michael Gaines from the Santa Clara Vanguard. We have Jeff Sacktig from the Carolina Crown. We have Leon May from the Boston Crusaders. We have John Vanderkoff from the Bluecoats, and we have Richard Hinshaw, I think. Is Richard on the screen? We have Richard Hinshaw from the Cavaliers. If he's not quite on, he will be on very shortly. We've got a few announcements to make before we introduce ourselves individually, and then we're going to get into some great discussion tonight. Again, it's a great pleasure for me to be on this call. I compared this in English football terms to being on the screen with some of the greatest footballers in living memory, and it really does mean that much to me tonight. So thank you to everyone that's on the call tonight. Okay, a few announcements. As I said, our sponsors for tonight are the guys at Ultimate Drill Book. So I'm going to read out something they've sent in here. Ultimate Drill Book is a proud sponsor of the Cadets and this Cadet Live presentation. Co-founders Luke and Josh Gall have a unique relationship with the Corps as alumni, having marched with us in the early and mid-2000s. Additionally, their brother Jacob Gall is also an alumni of the Corps and currently serves as the battery caption manager. Ultimate Drill Book's mobile app is being used by thousands of educators and students around the world. UDB app delivers drill in a contactless and safe manner, syncs directly with Piware in seconds, and has quickly become the industry standard in visual education. You can learn more about UDB app at www.ultimatedrillbook.com. Again, I said this last week on our call, but I know I speak for everyone on this call as well. I know we at Cadets are incredibly proud of our alumni, all of our alumni indeed, but the Gall brothers have done something very special in creating this app and making it far more efficient for all of us to do the thing that we love. And I know that they would speak very highly of all of us on the call. Okay, a special mention to Denise Bonfiglio, the Director and CEO of the Cadets, for supporting these webinars, and to Justin Moore, our COO, for setting up the Zoom broadcast and behind-the-scenes technology. I know this is being broadcast right now on YouTube, Facebook, as well as on our websites. Next Tuesday, we'll have a C-Brass webinar with Dr. Matt Stratton, which will be with several living legacy brass caption managers, including Jack Meehan and Freddie Martin and many more. Also, the 34 store continues to be open for business during this period. Please visit the 34 store at 34store.org. Lots of materials there for marching band and for drum and bugle corps, as well as much paraphernalia from the cadets. The Cadets Virtual Clinic is on July 30th to the 31st. If you haven't signed up to that yet, there's still time to do so at cadets.org/edge. And that is a clinic run by, again, Tom Onks and Dr. Matt Stratton. Another couple more events. The alumni of the Cadets can sign up for their own Corps reunion by going to cadets.org/cadets-virtual-reunions. I don't think you'll ever follow me on that link. So go to the website and look for the reunion link. But yes, lots going on there for reunions for the Cadets alumni. And I believe those reunions are across year groups. It's not certain year groups. It's across all the year groups to sign up. And the last announcement for me is alumni and fans can also support the Cadets by purchasing one of the old traditional uniforms. They've been made available from the last 10 years online, again at 34store.org. So if you always wanted to purchase one of those classic West Point cadet uniforms, they are for sale now on the website. Okay, before I do pass over to our amazing panel tonight, I think it'd be remiss of me not to mention today's announcement by Bands of America, for this fall season being cancelled. I think it was perhaps inevitable, but I felt the need to comment on that before we enjoy tonight's webinar. I know many of us are involved, myself really more as a fan and spectator, but so many of us on the screen now, my colleagues and people watching will be heavily involved. I thought about this a lot. I thought we need to mention that because I think teachers and educators take on a whole new role now, and have been over the last couple of months. And thoughts go out to those students whose aspirations and dreams will have to be on hold, and really strength and thought go out to all the educators and teachers who will need to support those young people through these, and navigate them indeed through these difficult times, and make sure they hold on to those dreams and aspirations. So again, thoughts go out to everybody. What I'm sure is quite a difficult day for many. Okay, but let's get back to some enjoyment tonight, and hopefully this webinar will bring some joy to people watching as well. And instead of starting with me tonight, I'm going to pass over to someone who I know very well. He was indeed my visual caption head from a marching standpoint in '96 and '97 before he moved on. Lots of stories that I might come back to, but that is Leon May. Over to you, sir.
Hello. What would you like me to say?
John, I ask, can I buy one of the classic uniforms that Leon wore? I want to buy a uniform that Leon wore in a show.
Well, let me tell you
just the last 10 years. No, Leon was way before those.
Yeah, Leon would always come up to when I marched, actually, and he would say in my ear, kind of, you make sure you march well because you're in my spot. I marched on the end of the line always. You're in my spot. I put you in that spot. Make sure you're perfect on the end there. So I'll leave you with that, Leon.
That sounds like something I would say. Well,
you didn't even say that. John was perfect.
Wasn't bad.
I'm not.
Awesome.
I'll probably say it again later, but John, still to this day, probably the best marcher I ever taught, John Bilby. I marched in the cadets in the late 80s, 88, 9, and 90, and then immediately started teaching the cadets right after that on the visual staff. Worked my way from being the mellophone tech to then teaching in 93 I taught in 92 with John Vanderkoff. Yeah. Taught in 93 with Jeff Sacktig. Started kind of tag team running the technique on a daily basis. And then through 94 was helping Mark chart some of the drill, as we all did, which I think all three of us would probably look back and say that that's one of the big ways that we learned how to write was charting drill from Mark. So did that through the mid 90s, kind of took over as the caption head 96. Jeff started writing in 95. So was cleaning his drill for a couple of years, 95, 6, 7. And just an awesome time at the cadets. Just loved being, on tour every day of the summer back then when I was young and could handle it, and teaching that much. It was great times. And then am I supposed to just keep going with my drum corps career?
Keep going. Come on. Let's go.
99, I wrote for the Crossmen. 2001, I wrote for the Phantom Regiment. 2002, I wrote for the Spirit of JSU. And then 2003 to 2016, 14 years, I wrote for Carolina Crown. And then the last 3 years I've spent with the Boston Crusaders. And here I am.
Yeah, thanks very much, Leon. There's so much more. Just to give you an idea, it was mind-blowing for me starting to do some research. I'm no James Corden, but he actually grew up near me. But I'm, trying to do some research for this tonight. Just kind of searching any one of you on the screen right now, filled a page of information, and you've not even scratched upon all of the amazing work you've done in Winter Garden, Bands of America, Leon, and all of those other things, and I'm sure we will come back to some of those things later on, but it really is mind-blowing who we have on the screen here. So again, for me personally, thank you for inspiring a generation of cadets back in the mid-90s. I know you moved on, but I still laugh at you coming to me in 99 saying that perfect score on the field 98 was because of you. Even though you wasn't there, it was still the vets. I know Darryl Pemberton loved that comment.
Oh Lord!
But
that's true.
We're going to move on now to John Vanderkoff, and before we do that, I was talking before on the call before we went live how Leon actually wrote a drill guide back in the mid-90s, and he wrote all of the people that contributed to the sort of, you know, the drill, the technique program at cadets. There's many names on there who I now know: Jeff Gooch, who I know, Joe Roach, who I know very well, Leon, of course, Trevor Gingrich, I think, was on there, a few others. But there was a name, John Vanderkoff, on that drill guide that many of the mid-90s cadets remember seeing that. But I'd never met John Vanderkoff. People told me he wrote the 93 Star Show, and interestingly, after I aged out 98, many of my good buddies joined the Blast cast and came to London. And I was working in London. I was actually working a bank then. I would go and hang out in Hammersmith with people like Rachel Anderson and Mike Esham and some of the other cadet alumni that were in that Blast cast. And they would all say, oh, you know, John Vanderkoff, he's over there, you know, go have a chat with him. But he was always busy, John, with kind of promotion and marketing and stuff going on. But the years kind of rolled on, and that story's always been the same. You know, in more recent years, I've talked about yourself and Mike Fanning. You know, he was obviously the visual caption supervisor at Blue Coats these last half decade or so. He would say the same. You know, oh, he's a great guy. We're kind of both Canadians, and you know, you've got to meet him. And for whatever reason, that has never happened. And here we are tonight, the first time we're really having a conversation, and there's sort of 5,000 people watching us. So not ideal, really, but hopefully we can keep in touch many more times after this. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yourself, John Vanderkoff.
Well, do you want me to start at the cadets, or should I go before that?
I think before, yeah, please.
Oh, sure. Okay, so I kind of grew up. I was born into drum corps. When I was 3 years old, I was the mascot for the Dutch Boy Cadets in my little lederhosen and vests and all that stuff. And my dad was one of the directors, and then he started the Ventures, which was an all-girls corps out of my hometown in Canada. And so I just toured around with them forever. And then eventually, they were all girls, so eventually I was not allowed to go on tour with them anymore because parents got, I don't know what. You know, I was the only guy around, let me just say that. So I went on marched with Kiwanis Cavaliers for 2 years, and through that, the Dutch Boy were becoming something. A lot of those guys went to cadets. Trevor Gingrich, Sean, oh my gosh, there's so many people that And so I ended up going to cadets. But funny story is, my dream was always to be in Santa Clara Vanguard. Ever since when I was like 2, my dad took me to the very first DCI, and I saw Santa Clara Vanguard. And especially the second year, I think they did Fiddler on the Roof or something like that, and it just stuck with me. So I actually auditioned to Santa Clara first in '85. And I don't really remember what happened. I have a bad memory. But somehow or other, that didn't work out. It came back. I talked to Trevor, who I got to know by this, Trevor Gingrich, and he told me to come down to camp and audition. It's funny how things all work out. Audition for cadets. So then I marched cadets for 3 years, from '85, '86, and '87, and got to know George Zingali really well then, and Mark, Mark for sure, and Jeff Sacktig, marching with right beside Jeff Sacktig, yeah, Ricky Wagon, all those guys. And then I kind of went back. I was in school trying to get my degree in composition. And I went back to Canada, and I wrote for the Ventures for a bunch of years. And in '92, I came to cadets to teach with Leon. And then after that year, I was asked by Star to come write for them. So I did that in '93. And then I was off drum corps for a while. Star went off in this different direction, and I went with them. And so we did brass theater for 3 years. And then, no, more than that. We toured with Canadian Brass for a few years. Then we went on our own in Branson, Missouri for 2 summers, and then finally figured it out. And then we evolved into Blast, which we opened over in London, which is sad that I didn't meet you during that time. I'm sorry I was so busy. And that took a lot of years, because we had that, and that ended up becoming really successful. Went to New York, I put up a bunch of touring shows, went to Japan, all that stuff there. And then came back to drum corps. Lord, I don't remember what year it was, with Madison Scouts. A bunch of us from Star days got together. We did Madison for 3 years, and then over to Blue Coats till present, really. That's kind of it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's interesting, John, actually, because I'll come back to myself at the end of this, but my sister started in 1979 here in England in an all-girls drum corps. And I was and they didn't allow boys in until 1985. So, it's interesting. Our names are spelled the same as well. Look at that.
That's right. See that?
4 years catching up to do that. But yeah, it's interesting. I like hearing those stories of, I know Jeff's family goes way back, which I know he'll mention as well. Okay, we're going to come back to a lot of that, John. So much in there, and just that impact of actually Blast and all the work you did with Cyberjam and Shockwave on the current, DCI trends and whatnot as well. But we're going to shortly go to Michael Gaines. But again, I have met Michael before. I think it was 2006, Michael, in Holland, believe it or not. I think I met you for the first time when Pride of Cincinnati toured over to Europe. And at the time, I was writing for a colour guard that Jonathan Schwartz was designing for me as well. And I think we were somewhere in Holland, and I think he introduced me to you. And
somewhere in Holland sounds about right.
Somewhere in Holland, I'm not sure where the show was, but we
that's the way those trips normally went.
Yeah, and you allowed me to watch the rehearsal for the day, which was pretty epic, actually. And again, I'm sure later we'll come back to the influence of colour guard on drum corps as well. But yeah, over to you, Michael.
So I guess the streamlined version is I started teaching. I marched Cavaliers for 4 years. I never marched with cadets. I never taught cadets. Somehow I ended up being really close friends with a whole lot of cadets, mostly out of admiration and mutual friends, I think. But yeah, I marched Cavaliers for 4 years, 87 through 90, and then started teaching right after that. Started teaching the color guard first, but within about a year, I was contributing to helping to write the drill design, when Steve Brubaker became ill. Did the color guard thing for a few more years. And then let's say 98 through 2011 was when I was like the visual coordinator, wrote the drill design, those kind of things. And then I took a sabbatical from drum corps for about 5 years and came back in 2017 as creative director of Santa Clara Vanguard, and I'm there currently. So that's about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, we'll come back, Michael. I mean, I'm not going to show the piece of paper that I put down here, but just some of the work that you guys have done, and obviously you've not even scratched upon any drill writing for marching bands. The work with Pride of Cincinnati. I understand did you start Escapade and did Leon march in that color guard? Is that true? Did I get that
That is
right?
correct. I started Escapade in 92, and Leon was a member in 92, and then he taught, I believe, the next 3 years, right, Leon?
Yep.
Yeah, you were there all 3 years. And yeah, it was great. It was great. He was just fantastic to have as a right-hand man. I don't know if I can call you that, but as a support system for sure. I mean, I was playing, especially in the initial years, I was playing director and selling candy bars and getting gyms and those kind of things. And, if I had to leave rehearsal, whatever, it was always great just to, have Leon there, because I knew that they were in great hands, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a lot of cadet connection to that Escapade guard. And actually Glenn Howard, who I had marched cadets with in 1990, he knew I had been in high school winter guard, and I had actually marched in a guard from Chicago called Anthron as well. So, and they were looking to fill out all the boys they needed for the guard. So he kept calling me. And I think I showed up to the second audition, and I met all of these guys, and, it's honestly, you talk about sliding door moments. I almost did not go to march in Escapade, but through that, I met a lot of people that I still work with today. And, Mike, who has been a huge influence on me for my entire career, we got to know each other. We got to work together. In 93, I was the drill cleaner. And, we did some drill back then. And then just being around Winter Guard, and, John was doing Emerald Marquee at that time too. And Jeff was doing the Crimson Kings. And, we were all four of us for sure, really involved in Winter Guard at that time too. But, a lot of cadet people were in that Escapade guard.
Yeah, I think my memories of marching in the mid-90s, it kind of is as Michael said, really, you know, he had lots of friends at Cadets Colour Guard, but, you know, I used to talk to all the guys on our Colour Guard that were in St Anne's, or they were in Elmwood Marquee, or there was in Pride of Cincinnati, you know, so there was always this kind of link, you know. When I noticed that, I knew you'd march Winter Guard, Leon, but it was only this week that I made the link that it was kind of Michael's Colour Guard that you was marching, you know. I guess growing up in that kind of Midwest area and in a similar area, but certainly going back to all the kids would, yeah, and indeed Greg Lagola, of course, would talk about John Vanderkoff at Elmwood Marquee. So you sort of knew these names, even if you didn't know the people all the way through that sort of growing up in Drum.
Yeah, and even back then, like when Leon came to March Escapade, I mean, I think I was probably only, what, 23, 4, somewhere in there, if that. So, I mean, well, no, I guess I had to be younger than that because there was still an age rule then, right? So you had to be 21.
It was my bonus year, for sure.
It was your bonus year, yeah. So we were all kind of the same age. So, you know, there was that dynamic going on as well. So we were friends in addition to coworkers or teacher student kind of thing.
Yeah. It takes me back when I'd ask the question, you know, to people like Mark Sylvester and to Leon or Jeff, you know, how when you first get into drill writing and want to be a better drill writer, often the answer would come back, then write Winter Guard. Yeah, that was something Jeff said very early on. You need to write Winter Guard, you know, or indoor drumline, or get involved in the winter scene. So, and I know we're going to come back to that, I'm sure, later in the call. But yeah, absolutely. I think there was a.
And John, I'll add, I'll lose the weight to buy Leon's cadet uniform and wear it, but I'm not doing that for the infamous Escapade uniform.
Yeah. I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, we all have.
Leon still wears that at night. So
shout out to Rosie.
It's my screensaver, Leon.
Great.
So I'm going to come on now to Richard Hinshaw, and I have met Richard a few times, and Richard, I don't know if you remember this, but I think he was on staff at Carolina Crown at the time, and you'd often come down to cadets pre-show visual warm-ups, and or a couple of times at least. And I know, you know, Richard is he's such a humble man, a lovely man. And he would always come up and ask, like, oh, is it okay if I can sit on the curb and watch visual warm-up? Which I found bizarre, because anyone that knows me is, yeah, certainly there'd never be a closed rehearsal anywhere near me. So, but yeah, Richard, I remember those times. And I tell that story a lot, you know, to where you are now and the phenomenal work you're doing at Cavaliers and, of course, Avon High School. You know, to think of you then being such a polite young man and coming over just to ask to watch us do a little bit of Across the Floors is mind-blowing to me. So over to you, Richard.
That's a great memory. I feel like I'm the guy on the screen that doesn't really belong. But, you know, I'm just a kid from farm town, Indiana. I fell in love with drum corps because my high school band directors and staff loved drum corps and specifically loved the cadets. So that's kind of what's cool about this. You know, like Michael, I really never had any direct connection to the cadets other than the love of what they did and how they transfixed us all, especially in the 90s. I don't know the 80s as much other than on video, but so my first drill writer was Jeff Gentry, my first high school drill writer, who marched with these guys in the cadets, which is awesome. And then, so I marched in the Glassman. The first drum corps show I ever saw live, I just did a post about this, was 1993, the Bloomington, Indiana Regional. And the Star of Indiana blew my mind. I had no clue what I was watching, but it changed my life. And John, of course, wrote that show. The second drum corps show I saw live was 1995 in Centerville, Ohio, and the Cavaliers, you know, left a huge mark on me for what the power of what they did. And so, because Star of Indiana wasn't around, I went and marched in the Glassman for 2 years, and Joey Weaver was my teacher, and loved that guy. And he, eventually, I kind of, you know, I tried college 3 times, none of it ever worked. And so I was just teaching band and kind of, you know, living out of the change in my cup holder, right? And Joe saw a group that I worked with. So Joe Weaver introduced me to Leon and all of the people who were at Center Grove, because I was in the area, and I went and taught Center Grove for 1 year. And in that same process, I taught Phantom Regiment for 1 year, and met Leon and Daniel Wiles, and just kind of that was my outlet to this world. was really through teaching more than it was through being in a group. I did the 1 year at Center Grove, and then I jumped over to Avon with Joey and Leon and Daniel, and that's been the thing that's opened up so many opportunities for me. And like you said, John, a lot of it has to do with also understanding drumline and color guard, which I had no background in. I'm a trumpet player, band geek, who just is a drill guy, right? And so what I learned through what these guys exposed me through at Avon was understanding all of the elements, which really gave me the opportunity to build a portfolio and have a career. So I wrote for the Academy out in Arizona from 2009 to 2013. Was an incredible learning opportunity to work with a semi-finalist level group. And then I got the opportunity to write for the Cavaliers in 2012. And then I have been back at the Cavaliers from 2016 to the present. I have been at Avon for 18 years, teaching that whole time, and then writing for about 12 of that. So, but yeah, it's cool. It's really neat to have the cadets kind of influence. And I love these stories about how we all got here, because I think it's different for everybody. And I think it's important too that we share these stories, because I do think, I'm a believer that we want this screen to look a little different, you know, in the future, that it's not just 6 white guys. And so I've been trying to share this story of how we all get here. And I think that empowers all kinds of people to want to get to here. And it's not a college degree, and it's not a traditional role. It's an apprenticeship, it's networking, it's all these things, and the relationships are so important. So
I agree with that entirely, Richard. And I came on a vacation with my family in last summer, and ended up the drill writer for cadets. So
yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, in all seriousness, you're absolutely right. You know, my wife, I met my wife, she's from Manchester, England, but I met her in America at DCI. She marched Southwind. She was a cymbal player. She actually auditioned snare, but was told she was a little bit too small, and you know, she may not make it. She wasn't going to be strong enough. But anyone that knows Michelle, my wife, and actually Southwind, after about a month, realised she could have easily marched snare and could have easily made it through that summer, because, you know, she looked at the Vanguard's cymbal line and probably could have made those guys and Madison in the mid-90s. You know, she was just an absolute, you know, beast of a performer, and you know, so strong. And, you know, we think back to that a lot, actually, those times, you know, and you know, Michelle always says, you know, where are those female drill writers as well, you know? So,
but I think it's coming, because we are seeing that in the groups that we teach and that we work with. You know, it's happening, that those, you know, those demographics, I guess, if you want to say whatever, that's changing. And so I think that this should be empowering. That, I mean, I am so lucky that for all these people on the call that influenced me, right? I'm the young pup in the group, and I think that there's the recognition that that opportunity is out there for anybody. You know, anybody, and I guarantee you that anyone on this screen, you send them a message and say, hey, would you help me with something? Or would you look at something I did? Or would you help me with the band director? We would all jump on the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to something Jeff said on our visual call last week, on the cadets visual call. You know, Jeff watches everybody, and he's always been the person that we always look up to. Of course, we look up to Mark, and Mark's the same, actually. Mark is taught us to be humble at cadets, you know, to go in the stadium when we had a night, well, very rarely, if we had a night off, to go and watch Allentown, we would go and watch all the other groups, you know, and Jeff would be the first person always at the food truck. You know, maybe it was 2001, you know, how's Cavaliers? And Jeff would be like, they're really good, they're amazing. You know, 99, how are Vanguard? They're really, really good. 2013, how are Crown? They're really good. You know, and that's that kind of mentality at cadets. And these webinars for me are something about getting rid of that kind of, you know, even my wife had no idea what cadets was like. She'd heard stories about the cadets and how competitive we are, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But it couldn't be actually further from the truth. You know, I remember rolling into shows, even in '98, when we ended up kind of victorious, but we'd be on the brass bus watching mid-90s Blue Devils. We'd be on the brass bus watching videos of 91 Star over and over again. You know, here we are, cadets, rolling into a show, you know, watching other drum corps. And I think that's important also in these calls, to sort of share that, really, you know, something. And it all does come from educators like Jeff and, you know, like Leon and like Mark, that kind of taught us to be that way. And you're absolutely right, Richard. Jeffrey Sacktig, over to you, sir.
Yeah, my path is similar to John. I was, my parents met in drum corps in the 1940s. So I have older siblings that were involved, and I had no choice. My dad, when I turned 9 years old, my dad said, you're going down to drum corps and you're gonna play a horn. I couldn't even pick what I wanted to play. He said, this is what you're playing. So that's how it worked for me. I didn't want to go, but you know, I was a shy kid, but I ended up doing it. My dad at one point, about 4 years later, was like, would you put that horn away? You're playing too much, you know, because I sucked it up. I enjoyed it so much. So I was a little church based corps, which in New York metropolitan area, they were all over the place. Every church had a drum corps. Basically, it was like a standstill group. They moved a little bit towards their end of their lifespan. And then I moved on to the Sunrisers for about 3 years, 83, 4, 5. You know, I started in 77. I went to the Garfield Cadets in 86, and actually, similar to John, it wasn't my first choice. I actually wanted to be in the Blue Devils. You know, I was always listening to all their recordings in the early 80s. I'd play along with them, you know, and I like to play the high notes and stuff. So I was like into that whole thing, you know. It's funny, you know, the cadets were close. They're right over the river. I lived in New York. It was, you know, I can get there in 30 minutes. So that's where we ended up, me and my buddy, snare drummer, and we kind of went. So 86 through 89, with my 4 years there, I marched with John Vanderkolff there, 86 and 87. And then I marched with Leon in 88 and 89. And then pretty much right after that, I taught the corps for a couple of years on the brass staff, and then also on the visual staff too. And then I kind of took over from Mark in 95, kind of writing. It's kind of interesting. I kind of didn't teach 92 just because just a little conflict. I wanted to step away. Somebody else was going to teach. So I kind of stepped away that year, and I taught senior corps, and I came back the next year, you know, kind of like the caption head. I was promised to write some stuff. Never really happened, but I was allowed to talk about it. You know, I was allowed to actually say stuff. I got yelled at. Mark at all time yelled at me, but at least I got to say some things. And like, you know, the next day after or whatever, he would say, you know what were you thinking about? What were you talking about? That, you know, I would always do stuff like passive aggressive. I would say like, that freeform like is the same as last year. You're really going to go with that? You know, so it would kind of like trigger him to kind of, you know, I get my ass kicked, and then the next day or two, we come around to it. So that was my kind of in. And in 94, I kind of did the same thing. I was like, yeah, you're going to write some stuff. Never really happened. Leon and I was actually going to Phantom Regiment in 95. Like we kind of worked that deal, and we were kind of out of there. But it didn't pan out. I stayed with the Corps. So I started in 95, and I wrote for 20 years for the cadets. Leon was with me at the beginning. You know, we kind of, you know, when I took over, we kind of made it a point to kind of move it in a different direction and do stuff how we wanted to do. Mark was always there in the background, kind of looking over our shoulders and supporting us all the way. But we definitely changed the way we wanted the Corps to be technically better. You know, they never really did technique every day. We kind of made sure that was a thing in 93, and really, you know, developed that. So the field level was, you know, for the things we were doing, we needed to take the next step, how we were going to do this and apply it on a technical level. So, you know, so I worked at the Corps for 20 years, wrote from 95 to 2015. Had some great times. You know, we, you know, went through a lot of different people who were working alongside of me. You know, I worked with Mark up until 2006, and then he left. In the last 8 or 9 years, I was kind of doing it myself. You know, and that process is always somebody else. Like, it's always like either working with Mark or working with Greg Lagola or another person that kind of shares a vision with you as you're kind of putting that stuff out there. And then I kind of had to take a year off to take care of, you know, someone special to me in 2016. I came back in 2017, and I went with the Carolina Crown. That whole thing kind of blew up. Leon moved on to Boston, and that job was offered to me, and I kind of took that, and I've been there ever since. So, you know, I'm a fan of drum corps. You know, I love it, and you know, I miss these guys because, you know, 2 nights ago on a Saturday, we would all be up in the top stand of San Antonio watching everybody's show. You know, there's that little perch that you walk all the way up, and like, you know, I always kind of text Leon. I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm up at the perch. Come on up, man. You know, it's like that, or any other shows. You know, we kind of run each other. We always kind of, or at BOA, we'll be together. Like all of us on the screen, like sit and watch, everybody, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm grateful that I'm close to these guys. I marched with 2 of them. I feel like they're brothers to me in some respect, and able to see what they do, is awesome. Like I go and I just I'm blown away, like at the talent of these guys. And I watch what they do, and like I'm saying, man, that's awesome. Leon, that's great stuff. Or I watch, Mike stuff the last whatever years. It's like, it's outstanding, and I'm a big fan of it. I'm happy to be on this call right now, kind of talking to you guys, because I miss you all.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredibly hard for myself because, I feel in absolute awe of everyone on this screen, and I'm going back to what I said before to Richard, in all seriousness, I've been around the drum corps scene in the States, and it's difficult as a Brit as well as a European or someone beyond the shores of the United States to kind of chase that dream, and finally get there. And I've no idea whether the 3.5 minutes that I have written so far is, when and if that will be fielded. But obviously, I'm really, really hoping for next year. But, I'm very keen to be stood aside, people like Richard as well, where we go back so far, to those original days on a curb at Allentown, watching some kids roll their feet and march backwards with straight legs, but to actually talk drill and actually as a designer, I'm really looking forward to those times, hopefully next summer. So myself, last here, there is indeed drum corps in Europe, as many people know. I started myself in 1979, my family, I guess, my sister was a mellophone player in the Mayflower Corps, who have now become the Mayflower Winter Guard, who Michael Shapiro writes for. And that was the corps that I was in. My family was heavily involved. My mum was the treasurer and dealt with kind of secretarial things and finance at that corps for many years. So they were an all-girls corps until 1985. And as I mentioned on the call last week, Boston Crusaders toured to Europe in 1982, and my parents housed their entire percussion staff for the weekend. So there's pictures of me in the garden at 5 years old with the whole Boston kind of percussion staff, which is kind of crazy now I think about it. So I'd marched a full 8 years in Britain before I came to audition at Cadets in November 95 for the 96 season. I'd gone on to march through the Mayflower Corps when they did accept boys onto a corps called the Blue Eagles. The Blue Eagles are a very successful corps in Europe, in England, kind of made up with lots of members that had marched DCI. So a lot of people that I really looked up to had marched places like Crossman, like Blue Devils, like Madison Scouts, Cadets themselves. So, from about the age of 13 or 14, was taught by some really great people and was a member of a drum corps around some great performers. So, I finally got to Cadets. It was actually my 18th birthday present to get a flight to the States. I kind of fell in love with Cadets, I must admit. I actually went to a rehearsal with Blue Devils. I very much enjoyed it too. I didn't know him at the time, but sat watching Gino teach the trumpet line. And then the next day I came to the University Stadium in Buffalo, 95, and watched Leon, Mark and Jeff teach that drum corps. I fell in love with that show, actually. I very much liked Cavaliers as well, 95. A very young Dean Westman, I believe, teaching the horn line that I've later got to know in 2003 at Cadets. But yeah, I fell in love with Cadets, really, and managed to get in the corps. For the 96 season, I marched on the soprano line 96, 97 and aged out 98. Phenomenal summers, amazing memories. And it was actually Leon, before he left in 97, kind of said, do you age out this year? You need to be on staff next year. And I kind of said, no, I age out 98, but would love to be on staff 99. But I do remember it being Leon, the first person that ever said that to me as a member. And of course, you don't forget those things. Us as teachers, it's so imperative that we do obviously watch what you say, but and say the positive things to the kids, say those things that kids hold on to, because here I am at 43 and I still remember Leon saying that on a field somewhere in middle America. So yeah, 99, Jeff did ask me back onto the visual staff, and I was on visual staff from 99 through to 2007, pretty much every summer. And we all remember on the screen now, back in the early 2000s, you wouldn't leave tour. I would get there May 17th and I would leave Cadets as the kids hung up their uniforms on the truck finals night. I didn't leave the Corps for 3 months. That was sort of 99, 2000, 2001, 02 kind of era. I then decided to get my act together. I was the same as you, Richard, kind of living out of my car and with pennies, decided to become a teacher. It was actually a lot of the guys at cadets, including Willie Higgins, actually a drum instructor, that sort of said to me, get your act together, go home, go back to university, get your teaching degree, and then you've got your summers to come back. Now, the difference in the UK is our summers are only 6 weeks long. So I could only ever come back to cadets after about 2003, 4, for like the last 3 or 4 weeks of the summer. So that's kind of how it worked. From 03 to 07, I did about the last month, 3 weeks. I took some time out in 2008 to get married. Also had some personal things going on here in the UK. Didn't come back to the cadets till 2011, a good year to come back for the last 3 weeks in the Angels and Demons year. And I then have done kind of the last 3 weeks on the field, really, still teaching visual down in the trenches where I love to be, in 16, 17. And a wonderful opportunity came up last year to be able to kind of rewrite the end of the show for the cadets. So sort of the last 2 minutes of last year's show, was the first time I've written for the Corps. I'd written the Cadets 2 show, the last time Cadets 2 went out the year before, which was, again, an amazing experience. But yeah, I'm just starting out here. So it's an amazing CPD for me to be on this call tonight, as well as the many thousands of people that I'm sure watching at home. So yeah, it's kind of my story, really. I'm going to kind of move on, gentlemen, and I'm going to move back to Leon, if that's okay, Leon.
Yeah, I have to start all these topics.
Yeah. Well, not all of them. Maybe you can. I know you, Leon. I know you well. So you mentioned you wrote for Crossman. I actually cleaned some drill. I remember in spring training, you got me across helping out in the field back in '99 at spring training. But anyway, then you moved on, obviously through Spirit JSU and Phantom. But I'm kind of really intrigued by, starting out at Crown. I believe it was 03. And I was there 14 seasons. And for me, as an outsider looking in, Leon, I suppose quite different to other people on the call. Like, I'm kind of taking over from Bobby Jones, a kind of famous drill writer, and Jeff Sacktig before him. And I know Michael will come back to his work with Steve Brubaker. Richard's work taking over from Michael Gaines, stepping into big shoes. But I think yourself, you've almost grown a drum corps to a championship. In my view, and I watched Crown get stronger and stronger and stronger through those early 2000s and become the kind of powerhouse that they are now, really. So kind of keen for you to talk a little bit about your journey with Carolina Crown. Some phenomenal shows, Bohemia and In Transit, Triple Crown, Finis, The Grass is Always Greener, Second Chance, Rackstar. I mean, phenomenal crowd-pleasing shows that won many accolades, and obviously 2013 was a phenomenal year, but again, some phenomenal shows all the way through there, Leon.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was quite a journey. The Corps didn't make finals the year before I had started, so they kind of had really started over with mostly new staff, and that fall, Jim Coates rounded up me and Michael Klesch, Rosie Queen. I got Daniel Wiles to be on board with me also as kind of a visual coordinator. Boy, so many people that I'm forgetting, but a lot of great people to kind of, start this thing from scratch. And, it meant everything getting that Corps into 10th place that first summer. I mean, I can remember being at San Antonio that year and making finals, and it was just the biggest rush for us, for the kids, for the people that had been there for many years, for the director at the time, Kevin Smith. I mean, it was an amazing time to kind of make that comeback, in a year. And the Corps ended up taking 10th place with a show called Bellissimo. We had Bells in the Rifles. That's when I started working with Michael Townsend, and I didn't really know him before that, other than I knew that he was in Blast, but he broke his ankle before the first show. That's what I knew about Michael Townsend. And I think, interestingly enough, that summer, Michael Townsend broke his ankle at Move-In and had to write some of the work at Move-In, on crutches. But anyways, I mean, that, I've written every drum corps show since 2003 with Michael Townsend since then. And, we've formed a great bond working together all these years. But yeah, those were great times. And I think the thing I think I'm most proud of from my years at Crown is that we always had a really good plan of knowing who we were every year and how we were going to progress the next year of the kind of show that we were going to do, the difficulty level of what that show was going to be, understanding the kids that we had, understanding the staff that we had, and, being able to kind of add every single year. And not too many missteps in that kind of 14-year span that I was there in terms of bringing the corps to, like you said, a championship caliber corps. Yeah. A lot of that helped by just, an amazing color guard, an amazing brass line, a drum line that worked their butt off and got better throughout the years. It was a great time.
Great story from that first year, because so many of us from Indy and Avon went to Crown that year, 2003, right? This was my third year teaching drum corps, and I was just lucky that Leon and Daniel asked me to go help this group. I had no clue what I was doing. But a great story and an indication of where that thing started from. We showed up at Move-In in South Carolina, and I think for the first week or two, there were 27 brass. And I remember, we would have these moments as a staff where we would go hang out and be like, oh my God, what are we doing? And where they took it from there was and what it is now is incredible. And so it truly was that we all had this incredible ownership in it, because it was this ground up thing, from truly the ground up. Leon and I, and Keith Potter too, had done Spirit the year before. We beat Crown and put Spirit in finals for the first time in 20 years. And so it was really cool to go to Crown then and just do it. And then where they took it past that was just pretty incredible.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember there being 13 trumpet holes out of 20 spots. Yep. When we first started doing drill that year. But yeah.
Did you have to rewrite anything? Did you ever in those early years, did you ever say, hey, we got to just take some people out? Did you have to kind of go reconstruct some stuff? Or
we always filled it.
I think we did end up filling the spots in, all those years. But there's there's so many great memories and highlights of just the journey that, that corps took along the way. And, obviously 2013, is real special to me, and I really think because of the music that year was the Einstein on the Beach stuff, which came from George Zingali's Erte Productions. That was 1985, the Winter Guard that tied for the championship that year. And I fell in love with that Philip Glass music, that year. And I can't remember whenever, I think that was before CDs were invented, but I know that I got those Einstein on the Beach CDs at some point, maybe in the 90s. And I used to listen to them a lot. And actually I remember John, in 2006, I remember the Woodlands did a little bit of Einstein on the Beach. And I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
But
I could tell you a little bit about that thing there just real quick. It's Mark took me to BAM to go see that Einstein on the Beach live. I have no idea when that was. It was, I don't know when it was. And it lasts forever. People would come, they would go out for dinner, and they would come back and watch the whole thing. Anyways, carry on. Sorry.
And straight through, it's like a 4-hour opera. And I actually
my gosh.
I had watched there was a bunch of stuff online, because that year, there was kind of a revival of it coming. And there was a lot of rehearsals and things and footage that you could see of, people singing and playing the parts. And then actually after the season was over in 2013, my wife and I went out to California and went to see it in LA. And it was, you know, it was fantastic. I loved it. She could hardly take it. it was like 4.5 hours long. And, you know, there's like some minimalism songs that are 20 minutes long in there that are pretty brutal if you're not really into it. But you know, I had fallen in love with that music because of, you know, Erte back in, you know, that 1985 show. And then to be able to put that on the field in such a, you know, great show design, a great horn line, a great, you know, color guard package. I mean, that, you know, that one certainly is very special to me.
There's so many special shows there, Leon, and like I say, as myself on staff at Cadets a lot of those years, just a big fan of the little nuances for me. And I'm not sure, I think really Crown until John Vanderkoff came with the whole costuming, and I think Crown were the first ones to sort of manipulate their uniform a little bit, whether it was a different colour plume or a sleeve that was off, and all of those little nuances that kind of fitted the show. I love that. And where did that come from, Leon?
You know, a lot of that was Keith Potter and Michael Cesario. I would say, and I think we kind of did cream uniforms from 03 until some version of until 2012. But in 2010 and 11, we started changing up the colors and the costumes, and we would have a jacket that we would wear for a few years, and we would have, you know, different color shirts and things underneath it. And so that started before that. But then, you know, once 2013 hit, I mean, the costume started to get different every year. And, you know, now you see what drum corps is today. It's kind of, you know, every year it's, you know, it's been amplified on, you know, how we're going to change the costumes. And, you know, the Blue Coats these last couple of years have just been, you know, fantastic with the costume design, as many others have too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to stick with a sort of theme of starting out here a little while before we carry on. I know we're going to come back. But John, if it's okay, if you could, I know many people on the screen are going to want to hear a little bit about Star 93. We're going to come back to Blue Coats. I'm sure we're going to come back to Blast. But I mean, I guess one thing for me is, what was that like? I know you'd learned from George Zingali and, you know, all of those years at Garfield Cadets, but going in there, I believe, is it Todd Ryan write the show 92 Star?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously that epic show from George Zingali the year before that. And you must have been incredibly young designer. And there you are taking over at Star and creating something that still stands. Yeah, it is such an epic show, you know, to every drum corps fan out there. So, you know, it would be amazing if you could talk us through a little bit. What was that like at the start of your career, really?
Well, the best and the worst thing is I was really young and I don't remember all that much. I was totally living my dream. So I taught in 92 at Cadets, and then I was all determined to go back home and take over the Ventures with Trevor Gingrich and take them over and make them into something. That didn't go well. That didn't end up that way. And Jim Mason kept calling me to come write Star. And it's such a weird time because I know I said no about 3 times to that. And I think, I don't exactly know why. I don't know what happened, but something happened. I was in school in Boston, and then I got a call. I know what it was. I got a call from Donnie, and then I got a call from Jimmer, and then I got a call from Tom Hannum. And I knew them sort of through my years with the Ventures and also with Cadets, although Donnie left when I came to Cadets, but you know, everybody knows Donnie and stuff like that. And they just reassured me, because there's big shoes, you know what I mean? George and Todd and Star. And they just made it seem like there's no way they were going to let me fail. You know what I mean? Like, they just made it feel like the absolute safest place for me to go. So I eventually said yes to go in there, and it was the most amazing corps I've ever, you know, I had great years at Cadets, but the structure and everything like that with Donnie and Jimmer and Jim Mason and Tom Hannum had set up, it just blew my mind. Everything was so incredibly organized, like unbelievable. And the kids were so talented, you could do anything. So then we went off, and I remember we had our staff meeting at George's house. George had passed away this time, but so his mom, May Zingaldi, would cook us, you know, cutlets and all that stuff there. And that's where we had our design meetings in her living room. She'd sit in her chair listen to us, and she'd always tell us her opinion on things like that. And Jimmer played, I think it was Jimmer or Tom played the Bartok, and May was like, what the hell is this? That's what I remember a lot about that. And I was in music school, composition at New England Conservatory. So, and I just spent a year and a half studying Bartok and Barber, like intensively. They're just one of my things. So it all just kind of lined up. I don't really know what to tell you. It was just the most supportive, talented thing. And they just wanted me, they didn't put any rules on me. They didn't tell me anything. I never felt any pressure, like we had to win or we had to do good in this capture. It was never that kind of environment at all. They just wanted it to be the newest thing that we could possibly imagine. That's what I remember about that. And it was just, you know, I'm just so lucky. I'm so lucky to have, I mean, think about that. That's Donnie and Tom and Jimmer, you know, and Jim Mason, and just people that just put your arms around you. And these are like, you know, they're up here. These are like the top of the top of the top, and so smart, and just put their arm around and say, you got it every single day. You know, yeah, I'm just lucky. Just learned so much that way. Did that answer anything?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, it's interesting because my age out 98, we had Matt Harloff and then Donny Van Dorn.
Oh, Matt, yeah.
So, you know, I aged out with kind of Jeff, you know, and Sully as a visual staff, you know, with Greg Lagola around still, obviously, and whatnot. And then my whole brass staff was Donny Van Dorn, Frank Sullivan, you know, Matt Harloff and those guys. So it's interesting because that core at 98 cadets, again, we would watch either 93 or 93 star or cadets on the bus and feel like we had the best of both worlds. You know, we had this, you know, this superstar, all-star staff, you know, it was just phenomenal. So yeah, just an amazing year. I guess one last question for me, which I know a lot of people may have. I feel like a lot of the choreography, kind of dance, if you will, for the horn players, that was the first year that you really explored that with Star, that still is being explored now, of course. And did that come from yourself, John? And what was
No. So we hired a gentleman out of New York, and what I can't remember is if he worked cadets before or after. Philip Burton, was it before or after, Jeff?
Yeah, he started in cadets in 88.
Yeah, 88.
In 88, that's right. And he did the whole slow motion thing, right? You remember that was at Les Mis or something?
Yeah, and he did all that, the glide hand and the balance, the weight.
Yeah, so Philip Burton, right? He developed this whole way of movement called expressive movement. Is what he called it, and it's hard for me to even describe, but it was so much more shape and line and center of weight and messing with all those kind of things. It's something that related so well to things that musicians can do and still be able to play their instruments, you know? I think I attribute a lot to that. And he was just such a great guy, and his wealth of knowledge of art and things like that. He came up to Canada, my house in the backyard, and I was totally into Kandinsky at that time. And we would just, you know, draw everything out in there, and he would give me all these books to read and stuff like that and just blow my mind with this stuff. So he, I think, was a big part of that, and then just giving him the opportunity, you know, because usually as drill writers, you know, well, we got to do these 8 counts and these 16 and stuff like that. Very seldom back then, unless it was an arc set where you go to second position and, you know, play loud and high, you know what I mean? Mostly it's dot to dot to dot to dot. And he really taught me, no, it's the stuff that's in between. You know, the pauses, you can pause and still create effect out of that. So you get into the detail. So then I would lay it out for him. He would do his thing. And then you go in together and we nuance it to come up with some effect that neither of us had ever seen before.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to move on. I'm going to come back to that, John, if that's okay. Michael, over to you now, really. And again, similar to sort of starting out, really, you know, what was it like, one, learning under the great Steve Brubaker, and then your first years? I know you had influence on those mid-90s years. I believe 98 was your first full year writing the whole show. But yeah, what was that like in those mid-90s under Steve Brubaker?
Well, I guess I only knew Steve really about two years before he passed away. I mean, I knew of him, obviously, but I'd say we became friends maybe, I don't know, maybe my last year in the Corps and then my first year teaching is where we really kind of became very good friends. And it was what I was saying this to someone last week, that in terms of how I learned from Steve, it was never, you know, like sit down and I'm going to teach you how to write drill. Like, I'm sure most of these guys are the same. It was more, you just take it in by osmosis and just watch every single thing, you know, they do. And then of course, you know, the occasional, if I would stay over in Chicago at his place, I would just be a pain in the butt the entire time, asking questions, just trying to soak it all in, those kind of things. And then it really just came to, you know, and I never, ever wanted to write drill, ever. It looked like a pain in the butt with all the instruments and all that stuff. So I was a color guard dude, you know, that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was practicing, you know. I was doing winter guard. And I would teach color guard outdoors. And it was really just a matter of when Steve got sick, and at that time, Greg Polklocki was also writing the drill, and they just needed help, you know, to finish it out when Steve got ill. And Greg was actually the one that suggested me, because he knew I'd been teaching indoor. And so they asked me if I taught outdoor drill before. I may have stretched the truth a little bit and said yes, which was not true at all. But, and I'm going to totally out Steve Brubaker here. I've told the story a couple of times, but he got his job at Cavaliers the same way. He and Jeff Fiedler lied to Don Warren about that. So I don't feel guilty at all. It's you know, it's the karma. But so I said yes, I would. And then he said, great, I need you to, this was 92, I need you to redo the drum solo. And I remember sitting there with those big Jensen sheets of paper and the pencil in Brubaker's condo in Chicago, thinking, what did I just get myself into? I did cry because I was so stressed out. I didn't know what to do. You know, I'd hear him walk up. He had a cane at that point, so I'd hear that slowly coming up. He would calm me down and say, "You'll be fine," whatever. So it all worked out fine. But it was not a very auspicious introduction. But you know, it did work out well. And then I excuse me, I wrote drill the next year in '93. I think the first full version of the show. A lot of it got changed, and then I was placed back into the color guard world after that, with some comments about being too young to write drill. And so, you know, I taught the color guard in '94, '95, '96. And obviously Brubaker passed away in January of '93. So, you know, I didn't have a lot of time with him. Well, none of us had enough time with him. He was obviously a genius. You know, and he wrote a segment of Escapade's Winter Guard show the very first year that I'm really happy that I had asked. It was just, I don't know, what do you think, Leon? Maybe like 30 seconds a minute, something. And, but it was just really, you know, I'm glad that was the last, I think that was the last drill he ever wrote, actually. He wrote it out by hand and on paper and stuff. But, you know, having said that, it is really just by studying everything he did. And you know, not just Brubaker. You know, when people ask me the drills that inspired me, a lot of times I immediately think, you know, some of the stuff Mark was doing at cadets, you know, like in, you know, 90, 92, 93, all those years, you know, just was fascinating to me. Yeah, so in the beginning, I feel like most people do, you kind of speak what you know design-wise, right? And so when I started writing drill, I was totally speaking Brubaker-ish, you know, literally sometimes. And then, you know, as you develop your own voice, you kind of take the best of what you knew from that and create your own thing. And I think everyone probably here would say that's probably the way things went for them as well. So, you know, I'm totally getting off topic, aren't I? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think this needs to be organic tonight. I mean, like I say, I love the way these stories interconnect, actually, because I remember, you know, Mark would always talk about Steve Brubaker to us, and I know Jay Murphy's not on the call tonight at Blue Devils, but he would talk about all the other designers, you know, as well as you know, as well as that, it would never always be about cadets. It would be about, you know, just you've got to venture out, go and watch these groups. So it's lovely to actually hear the link between everybody, actually.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised at what good friends all of us really are. You know, as John was saying, John, I can't even get his name right. We're really good friends. As Jeff was saying about how we would all sit together, you know, at different events and, you know, make fun of each other and never be able to get up because we're like, okay, I'm going to leave after this group. No, you can't. Leon's group's coming up. Okay, after that one. No, Richard's group's coming up. No, Jeff, you know, it's one of those things. But even in, you know, we're all, well, I won't say we all, I'll speak for myself. You know, after all these years, I'm still a pretty insecure person, right? I've just developed a way to compartmentalize it or have a thicker skin and can deal with criticism a lot better. But, as a designer, I still have those same insecurities that rear their head at times. And, like I remember, and these guys are usually the ones they'll pick me up when I'm down. Like, I remember one of the years, Cavaliers were having a rough time early season, like 2010. I remember it distinctly. And I was really feeling down. They're being beaten captions by these cores that had never been before. Everyone was talking bad about them. And John Vanderkoff, I don't know if you remember this, but John and Jim Moore, I talked to them on the phone, and they were the ones like, they saw something in it that made me think, okay, maybe I am doing good work here. Maybe this is okay. Those kind of things. And all these guys have done that for me at one point or the other. And so it really is a community. Even though we're all competitors in different places, areas, activities, I think we're all friends first. And I think that's really kind of special, to be honest, especially given that when we grew up in the activity, it wasn't really that way. It was a lot more competitive, and you're over here, that you're over here, those kind of things. And I'm very grateful that things have evolved.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. I distinctly remember, and these were years that I was on for the full summer at Cadets. Jeff had me on staff 2000, 2001, and we obviously had a phenomenal year 2000. Great show for Cadets. But 2001, we were a phenomenal drum corps. 2001, I always say this: the horn line were amazing. They marched beautifully. Everything about the corps was great. But I remember coming back very early season and talking to the kids, which I was very passionate about, making sure, again, I was a teacher to those cadets, and they would say to me, "How were we tonight? You were phenomenal," and they would say, "How are Cavaliers?" And I'd be, my answer was, "You need to go and see them." Something very special going on at Cavaliers around that era, that 2000, 2001, 02, of course. And it was kind of that, again, it came from Jeff, it came from that kind of humble approach to be very honest with the kids around a food truck. And that was the response. I guess there couldn't be any more sort of powerful response in admiration for others' work, really, is to tell your kids to go and watch, because I distinctly remember that, those
and years. I love the fact that you are honest with them, because I always try to teach that to people that I mentor, is like, you've got to be honest and tell them when things are not good, or else they're not going to believe you. Like if everything is always rosy, they're not going to pay attention to what you say. If every time they get off the field, it's like, "You did great, kids." You've got to be honest. And there's a way to do that constructively, obviously. But then the same thing goes to watching your competitors, as you were just saying. I mean, you've got to teach, I shouldn't say kids, young performers, to appreciate things that are different from what they're being taught. Yeah,
absolutely. Richard, how was it in 2012, taken over from Michael, I guess, at Cavaliers? It was a period of time there in the 2000s that, such a powerhouse core there, the Cavaliers, and still are, of course. But how was that in your first year? I know you're coming off some very successful years with Avon High School at Bands of America, that obviously Leon wrote for as well before yourself. But yeah, talk us through 2012.
The answer to the question is impossible. So, I mean, I certainly, I had written for the Academy in 9, 10, 11, and I had written for Avon from 2009 on. But, certainly my step into the bright lights was not nearly as successful as John's. And that's okay. I don't regret it. It's funny, I knew going in that it was an incredibly difficult situation, but I couldn't get past at the time that it was an opportunity that it was one of those like, man, this opportunity doesn't just fall in your lap. The opportunity to write for the Cavaliers. It doesn't just happen every day. So as much as, and I spent a couple weeks really interviewing them and talking to all of my friends and mentors and really asking, should I do this? I don't know. It's Michael Gaines. What? This is stupid. What am I doing? This is career suicide, right? So, but it just came down to that I took the attitude and the approach that, when you get an opportunity like that, you don't pass it up and you go full on, you go full out into it. And it's an experience that really formed me since then, right? So, it wasn't a great season. It wasn't a show that meshed really well, but at the same time, there were a lot of things that we did that we were proud of. ultimately I ended up being the guy that got let go. And it was kind of cool because as hard as that was, that became my bulletin board material, right? If you're a sports fan, you know what a bulletin board material is. And that summer became kind of the, yeah, this guy's no good. So that kind of drove me further. And I still, I still think about it and reflect upon it, even now being back at the Cavaliers for 4 or 5 years. So it's always good to have that. You need to know what can push you to greater heights. And I'm lucky too. Like, I probably don't take that risk of following Michael at the Cavaliers if I don't have Avon, right? So I would call my experience at Avon maybe similar to John's at Star, where I was in an environment where so many people were at the top of their game, and Leon before me and all these people. It was so good that it was, it's like, I kind of can agree with what John's saying. It was almost like, I can't really remember why it went so well, but all these people that helped me made it so good. So, I had that first couple of years at Avon where we were just at the very top of the game. So that was a part of the calculus, was if this doesn't work, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to push myself past that. But I kind of have a home base to fall back on. And of course it's come full circle. And so now that's made my current time at the Cavaliers even more special, because, and everybody who's there knows that I lived that, and it's kind of cool. There's a lot that you could go into it, but I think that what I love about what all these guys are saying is that the support that we all have for each other, and the camaraderie, and the way that every single person on this screen has inspired me and taught me, has kind of helped me to be able to do these kinds of things, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing, Richard. And for me, I've been out to the DCI in 2016, and again last summer with my family. We kind of did a family vacation, and it was amazing to sit in the audience actually, just as a spectator and as a fan. And I know kind of Jeff does that all the time anyway. Even the echelons he's got to. But I've been a big fan, Richard. The 16 propaganda show through to now, you're bringing something very fresh to everybody, and I'm a really big fan of your shows. This last few years, and if there was a few shows that I wanted to watch before tonight's video again, webinar, it was those. Some real amazing creativity and your use of props and things, and you can just see that kind of your work morphing between Avon and Cavaliers, and just thank you. It's lovely for me to tell a story. I know that guy. I know Richard. He used to we used to talk feet and cleaning drill a lot, and now look where he is at. So it's
you know what, Richard, and I just have to say that I'm always going to be a Cavalier, right? I'm always going to be loyal to my home team, those kind of things. And I've told you guys this before, that just seeing the evolution and what you guys are doing with the core just makes me so proud to be a Cavalier. I'm so grateful to you guys for what you're bringing to them and the experiences you're giving those guys. And, and I'm sure some of these other guys feel the same way about, their original cores, like the cadets, we're here tonight. I just wanted to say that I think you guys are doing amazing work, and I'm really proud to be, part of that team.
No, that's awesome. And even, it's funny, something I didn't say was that in that year, that year that I did Cavaliers the first time, 2012, what was kind of cool in all the criticism of it was also the support that I got underneath, right? From all of these guys, and just from people who knew, right? The people that knew like, no, dude, you're doing a good job. Just keep on doing your thing. And Michael said it more than once that summer. And then since then, and we take a ton of pride in the fact that we can make him be like, I remember in 2016 in propaganda, that was a big deal for us that, that Michael was our biggest fan, and that was a special summer.
Yeah, it's a great show. Jeff, we're going to come back shortly after Jeff actually to talk about those people that, have influenced and who we design with. People like Andy Toth, I know, and Daniel Wiles, and Keith Potter, all those, everyone on the screen here seems to have this kind of double act, if you like, and sometimes more, always more, in fact, but we'll come back to that in a second. Jeff, it goes without saying that really it was you that brought these amazing designers together tonight, really. I know some, I know most, but obviously your personality and the respect that you have in the drum corps kind of arena has brought these guys on the screen tonight. I'm very honoured to be on here with you. And again, it's a part of your tutelage, really. You know, I think you was adamant that I would MC this tonight, as nervous as I am, and it's like 3 a.m. here in the UK. You was adamant that I did this as a part of that growing up, I guess. But Jeff, how was that for you? Again, you was young. 95 was your first full season. I know you'd written some bits in 93, 94, or certainly helped Mark. But again, very similar, you know, going from Zingali to Mark Sylvester to yourself, massive shoes to fill. Yeah, how was that?
It was scary, quite honestly. You know, for me, I was fortunate enough to march George Zingali drill and a Mark Sylvester drill. And then when I was on staff, Mark was, you know, he was quick to pass the charts over or for us to dot them, and for us to kind of, you know. And so, I mean, I did whatever I needed to do. I mean, you know, when I first got on staff, Mark gave me his charting bag and said, don't lose this. So my first year, I had to make sure the charting bag got from wherever he left it and onto the bus. You know what I mean? Like that and his shoes, because he always walked out of his shoes. So I had to make sure that, like, that was my job, my first year. You know, I teched the trumpets, and I had to make sure the charting bag and the shoes were in the same place they needed to be. So.
Was there a toothbrush in the bag?
And his lighter, yeah.
Different toothbrush every day.
I'll tell you one thing about Mark. I suggested that he get the wallet with the chain on it.
Yeah.
I suggested he do that because he always lost it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he kind of did that, and like he lost it less. So anyway, Mark was truly my mentor, and it was a progression to that. You know, so I was charting, putting the dots on the page, you know, and like, you know, making sure it looked pretty, and I kind of put in like the legend and stuff on it. Like we used to, you know, John, when we marched, right, it was all S's and M's. There was nobody numbered, right? Yeah. So like I said, I was like, well, you know, maybe we should start to do these things to help the kids. So I put the legend in and all that other stuff. And then Mark said to me one day, he goes, as I'm doing it, he goes, hey, are you measuring? I go, am I measuring? What does that mean? You know, are you making sure people can get to the next set? I go, you didn't tell me how to do that. So that was a whole nother layer on top of whatever, you know? And I was a math major in school. So like the whole graphing, and that was cool to me. I was like so inspired to do that. I was like, I'll do it, you know, no problem. And it was one day we had like add a whole trumpet player to the whole show. So he said, you got to add one more dot to every page in the show. I go, all right, take the charts and do it. You know, so, you know, for me, that's how I learned the craft of kind of placing people, and learn the craft of, like, you know, drawing and how the shapes move as you watch and you teach them and you work with your small sections. You know, Mark was really one-man show when it came to that stuff. So all of us just kind of just followed suit. I mean, Leon can kind of testify to that. We kind of just, you know, we didn't even know what's going to happen sometimes at a rehearsal. You know, so my evolution was, you know, I tried to do it better. I tried to kind of like, and more so out of fear, because the room I was in has so much egos involved. George Hopkins, you had April, you had, you know, Tom Unks, you know, there was just a slew of people that have been doing it a long time. And, you know, and I took over for a corps that was like, it was running well at the highest level. So I had to kind of jump in and kind of be a part of that wave and hang, you know. And I was the least, you know, I have no ego at any of these guys. So I just was ducking my head, and I wanted to make sure I wanted to do it better than Mark. That's what drove me. And, you know, George wrote long sets. Like he wrote 32 count phrases, 44 count phrases. When we look at the page, we had no idea. I had no idea how we were doing this. You wasn't even sure who you were, but they crafted it. They put it out there. They put the subsets in. It was like clay. I describe Mark as a sculptor, you know, like when he wrote drill and stuff. Now he took the next step from George. He got down to 24 and 16 count phrases. Yeah. And then my thing is like, I'm just going to write all the subsets. I'm going to write them. I'm going to get them all done so we can teach it more officially on the field, you know, be efficient about it. And that's where I stepped in. And that was like, for me, that was the biggest thing that I think I contributed to it. But it also, it had less questions. You know what I mean? Like no one was guessing, hey, what's going on between page 2 and 4? What is going, well, no, they're all broken down. So just teach the dots and we'll be all right. So, and that was more out of fear than anything else, because I wanted to kind of, you know, do a good job for everybody, and make sure that, you know, the corps learned faster. So, you know, I got comfortable after a certain point, just because, and, you know, it was weird how your environment changes. You know, like there was a lot of times when those years when Mark wrote, like the endings, like, oh, we're going to fix that later. You know, we'll get to that. We'll do the new ending, you know, like, and there was a lot of loose ends. So like I said, I'm going to make it right the first time, you know? So when that happened, Mark and George was like, we're saying to themselves, like, we can change anything we want because Jeff will figure it out. I just give him a day or two. And so we were at a point in time where like the shows would be long, or like, no, we're gonna do this ending, we're gonna change this, we're gonna add this stuff to it. And in the middle of the season, I would have the task to go back and restructure things, which I did a lot of times. It caused me to leave too. That was one of the things too. But I did go back. But my biggest thing was I just tried to, and of course they were huge shoes to fill, and I just wanted to do a better job than the guy before me. And I had a lot of support. My first year, I moved in with Mark about 2 or 3 weeks before spring training, and I got to say he was the best mentor ever, because it wasn't like he ever like looked over my shoulder every day. Like it wasn't like he kind of checked on me to make sure I was getting it right or whatever. He let me do my thing. I got my start kind of designing in Winter Guard. So I wrote for the Crimson Kings, which is with a all Chinese group in Chinatown, New York, 1991, something like that. So I started doing that. I wrote some marching man stuff along the way. And, I guess teaching the Corps, they saw something in me. Like Mark was, wanting me to stay and do X, Y, and Z. It took a little bit, but I got there. And even as I was doing it, he let me be who I was. And he would come back at night and said, how'd it go? What'd you do? And I'd show him 5, 6, 7 pages. Cool, looks great, and the funny thing was, he asked me, like one of the first time, Mark goes, do you want me to chart something for you? And I said, okay. So I gave him a chart. Now I'm kind of an anal guy, so like the specifics on how that looks, was important to me. But Mark took one page and there was a cigarette burn in the corner and coffee spilled all across it. So that was the last.
Of course there was.
And the last page Mark charted. At that point, nobody touched those charts. Even Leon. I don't think Leon. We roomed together in spring training many times, and no one came close to those charts. Leon would be the guy who'd come over my shoulder and go, "We can't do that. That's way too hard."
I do miss those days, Jeff. I touched on it last week, being on visual staff and, sleeping in our little dorm room at wherever that was, that college in Pennsylvania, that, Jeff would write through the night as many drill writers do. And you'd wake up as a visual staff the next morning, back in the 90s. It would be 6 a.m. to grab the 6, 7, 10 pages that Jeff had written and take them straight down to Staples to get copied, 150 times for the Corps, and I love that excitement of seeing fresh drill for the first time. I wanted to get up before the other visual guys to go and get that drill at 6 a.m. to see it, especially if it was like the end of the opener or like the end of the show, or, it was special moments there. Of course, still pie where we write through the night, but there was something special about those handwritten charts, literally hot off the press, taking them to Staples to get copied for the Corps. Amazing memories.
It's interesting. Like I obviously never knew George, and I couldn't have told you that George wrote 44 count sets. Like from watching his stuff, I would have never. That's news to me, right? So it's really interesting to see that, like, those shows were written that way on paper and with the imagination and with the, okay, now we're going to stage how we get those 44 counts, right? But now you go to now and you go over here and you got 2 count sets over here, right? In the Cavaliers in the early 2000s, and to see that evolution yet for the same purpose and the same
that sticks in my head, that 44 count stuff, because John, in '87 we had that built to that block in that middle of the show, and it was 44 counts from this big set, and the whole drum corps was in a block, and like no idea, there must have been about 12 sets that Mark manipulated to get that thing to work. You know what I mean?
But like my first experience of that was, I'm not sure if any of you guys remember the end of the opener in '85. They did the infinity sign that ate itself and came back out. And George just wrote the beginning and the end of it. And it was, I don't know, 80, I don't know how many counts it was. And every day Mark would just go away and chip away at it. You know what I mean? And make it happen and make it happen. So, and that was the same thing in the build to the block. You know what I mean? It was just like, George knew that he had Mark, probably like Mark knew he had you, Jeff. You know what I mean? It's like, well, here's the big idea, and then he'll go craft it all up and it'll be awesome and all look really good.
That's I kind of learned, maybe embarrassingly so, but the end of the '87 show, from the dissolving company front to the block in the corner, was all Mark as well. I guess I think George wrote the block in the corner and had the company front, and Mark created all the reshapes into that block.
Yeah, but that was so much George's thing, and he could certainly do it, but he was like, he got the idea, the concept, and kind of that emotion out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he and Mark, however much they were like this all the time, like they were like this, like it was really amazing.
Yeah. So George was happy for it to be his idea, but allow Mark to work the magic almost.
Well, yeah, you could say that.
I that about cross to cross too, right? I mean, that's the story.
Yeah.
So, similar story, I imagine. That was Todd.
Well, but that was George and Todd Ryan, I believe. Yeah. First, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
I think it was Todd Ryan making it. And George was really sick then, and they flew in May's eggplant parmesan from Boston, and he was up there. Anyways, there's all kinds of stories about how that all happened, but that was all done on the fly. That was
and how many days before finals?
Yeah, I don't know. That was pre-me. I was doing the ventures.
Yeah.
I don't know. But that's just George.
It sort of kind of takes me on to this next stage. Actually, you talk about there George Zingali and Todd Ryan, and but I wrote some names down here: Jim Moore, Andy Toth, Keith Potter, Daniel Wiles, Rick Sabao now at Crown with Jeff, and I know there are many others, but I don't personally know all of the names I've just said, but I do. I feel like I do. I feel like I've done had my own discourse and conversations, and I've learned who these people are. So, I mean, I'm not going to go through you one by one here, but maybe I could go back to Leon initially, but we can just bounce off of each other. Leon, I know that, Keith Potter you've worked with for years. I mean, you was with him at Cadets back in 96, 97. So
yeah, well,
what is it about this kind of double act that seems every great drill writer on the screen right now? And you think of Scott Chandler as well, of course, and Jay Murphy at Blue Devils. There's something about that collaboration.
It's what I love to do, and I'm sure these guys too. I mean, I just want to make great art with my friends, and and a lot of those people. I mean, Keith, for example. I mean, we marched in Escapade together in Mike's Guard. Then we taught cadets together, and then we were at Center Grove. And really, I credit Keith with kind of giving me my break. Center Grove's marching band was really great, and I was like the drill cleaner guy. And they needed a drill writer in 1997, and they had just been top 2 in BOA for the previous 2 years. So then, and I got my break writing for Center Grove that year, and that was really the break that led me to writing for the Crossmen and then the rest of my career. So I certainly owe a lot to him. Jim Moore was my bus partner in 91 and 92 while we were teaching the cadets. And then after his he was I think he was the guard designer through 95 at the cadets, and then worked many, many years with John with Brass Theater and Blast and all of that. And obviously still with the Bluecoats. Jim also did a lot of the hornline body for Crown from 05 through 2014. I did a lot of work with him there, and everybody that's on your list here I've worked with and taught. I actually taught Rick Subel in 1992 when he was a baritone player in the cadets. Andy Toth, yeah.
I mean, Andy Toth, again, I know him a little bit. Again, he's a really just lovely guy, and very humble and whatnot. But he's been with yourself, Michael, not only now, obviously at Santa Clara Vanguard and the phenomenal work you're doing there, but obviously, with you through Cavaliers as well, I believe. Yeah.
He and I have worked. Well, he was. Well, pretty much everyone I work with actually was a former student, except for maybe Jim. It's just one of those things that, like I said before, when we started out so young and we were all the same age, that we just kind of grew up together, and Andy's been, he marched Cavaliers. I remember giving him a shot at Centerville High School. I joke about, they were doing a slumber party show. I'm like, all right, write some teddy bear work, some teddy bear choreography. We'll see how you do, and here we are, 20 whatever years later. But yeah, Cavaliers, Aimachi, with me. Santa Clara Vanguard, he's hugely important in there. Same with Keith, was a student of mine that I asked to teach Carroll High School initially, and then Escapade, and then we're still working together at Pride of Cincinnati. Jim, I actually marched with Jim in State Street Review and for a season, and we weren't really close then. We didn't become close until later, when I asked him to come in and teach Carroll High School, which was the first high school I ever taught. And that's when we became really good friends. And some of my favorite projects ever are just working at Imachi, just he and I in the gym, just making things happen. So it's like one of the things I discovered early on was that the best way to become better is realize what you're not good at and what other people are, and surround yourself with those people and learn from them and collaborate with them. And I feel like that's what I've done fairly successfully, over my career, is just, like a security blanket, just wrap yourself in the people who mean a lot to you and who are extremely talented and push you to be a better version of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the big picture piece of it, is the collaboration, right? None of us can do what we do without the team, and it is a team. And there are obviously examples where it's one person specifically, but none of us can do great things without great music, without great ideas. I need that color guard influence to help me in my writing and help me with the editing of it. And that's obviously, now that's Daniel for me. But I was lucky that when I was at Avon, that was Leon and Daniel when I was learning. And it doesn't have to be the same person on every project. Like, we all work for multiple groups, right? And we all have, that person could be a color guard director at a high school band, but ultimately that responsibility of collaboration is the same. Like, you have to find that, what is the choreographic vision, or at least for me, what is the choreographic vision, and how does that set up how I'm going to set the staging up to the best of my ability, and also do some cool motion and drill. But it's so important. And I know, Daniel and I really look up to Jay and Scott so much in how they do things so differently, and this complete, and the way they can develop things over the course of the whole summer with the way their schedule works and the way their talent works. And so every year I know we're looking at that to say, wow, man, that's awesome. You know what I mean? So, but it is so important to say that, in every project that we do with any group at any level, that collaboration, it may be a band director, you know what I mean? It might just be a guard director, or maybe it's a great choreographer that you work with. It's anyone. That all of these projects need that teamwork. It is so important. It's not just about us.
And sometimes it's like, exactly what you're saying. Don't you think you develop this comfortable relationship of collaboration, but then there's times that you really feel like, okay, I know what that is. I need to branch out. And like, you hope to connect with someone new to spark something in you that this other thing, although it's created wonderful things, maybe didn't spark in you, and I think that's what I loved, especially these days. And, like I was in Japan, and I worked a week with Michael Rosales on the Blast show over there. And I've known Michael forever, but we'd never worked together, and we did one or two pieces together. And right after that, I was like, I really want him to be in my life creatively somehow. And, obviously we work together now at Santa Clara. That happened. I'm always talking with John. We're always talking about how we would love to do something together. If someone, we obviously do the same thing visually, but, I always joke with him about, okay, you write the music, I'll do the visual, we'll do it somewhere. And I think that'd be so much fun, with any of these guys, whether that'll ever, the circumstances will ever allow that to happen, I don't know. But, just working with different people inspires different ways of being creative, I think.
Yeah, I mean, let's go to you, John. Actually, we're going to sort of skip here a little bit, because I remember being in London, like I told you before, back in the late 90s. And at the time, I was just teaching at cadets and trying to find out a bit more. I love the Blast thing, and I really enjoyed the production on the stage. There was the element of kind of the drill, I guess you could say, an element of that on there, of course, and some awesome stuff on there, I must admit. So trying to find out about yourself, John, I obviously found out you wrote music as well as staged and choreographed or assisted. It was so much more, that kind of visual audio combination. And I believe you worked with Jim Moore from that moment, I guess, you know, in those blast years. But, you know, maybe talk a little bit about that. But also, you know, there are certain moments. 2001, I remember with Michael at Cavaliers, but you know, that tilt show, especially in you know, was that 2014, right? Yeah, 2014.
That's right.
Just you didn't win. I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you come second, third? I'm not even sure. I'm not. But it was groundbreaking.
I don't know.
I remember being at the Akron show, and it was, you know, Mike Fanning and a few others said, "You've got to see it, John. Have you not seen it yet?" And I think it was the Blue Coats home show, maybe. And I was in the back corner, and the entire audience was orange. It just felt like that anyway. Like the whole of it felt like the whole activity had kind of consumed this new thing on the scene, you know. And I remember just seeing you with Jim Moore, and it clearly was just this amazing creative collaboration, you know, where you decided to just mix things up a little bit. So, you know, maybe you could talk us through that.
Talk about Jim.
Talk about Jim. Talk about your.
I'm happy to. We could all talk about Jim.
Talk us through Jim.
I swear he's worked with everybody here in like a pretty amazing level. I mean, Jim's, well, first of all, he's my best friend, but he's the most inspiring, one of the most inspiring people I've ever met in my life. And we just hit it off like that. It was actually started way back in the 90s with Emerald Marquis when I first came in. And much like Richard, I didn't know anything about Winter Guard at all. And then they hired me to do Emerald, and it was awful. To this day, I have nightmares about it, but it was really Jim that helped me through so much of that. And then we were there for years, and Greg Lagola, you know, just, gosh, Greg Lagola, that's another name for sure. Just unbelievable. But anyway, so we went all through, and then came time, we got to the blasting. So Jim left cadets, I think, after 95, and Jim was an amazing performer. So Jim's a professional ballet dancer, professional dancer, pure all around. And he had the opportunity to come perform with Brass Theater. And that might've been what drove him, you know, to come over with us and to see what we were doing. And of course, then he got a chance to start choreographing, or he was always choreographing drum corps, but on stage. And it was like, oh my gosh, you kidding me? This guy's unbelievable. And then that all evolved, and he was with me at the ground floor of putting Blast together. You know, he had as much say as anybody in that room as to what that show became. And he choreographed every single step of that entire show. Well, and George Pinney, but the main gist of the thing was Jim Moore. And he was a lead performer doing all that stuff there. I don't know, he's just such an inspiring guy, you know? And then I don't think we've ever, he performed. He was a lead performer for a bunch. He went to New York. He performed on Broadway then, and then he did the touring show, and also helped put all the touring shows, because we had a lot of them, and he kept going to Japan every year and teaching everybody and all that stuff. Anyways, that kind of come to an end. And then we did Madison, then it evolved to Blue Coats. And Jim and I came to Blue Coats at the same time. And you know, I really can't tell you. I think I need specific questions to remember how 2014 happened. You know what I mean? Everything, I'm sure you guys can all, everything is a progression of what happened before, and you don't always know. And it's hard even in reflection to go, oh, it was this, that therefore this, that therefore this, therefore this. Either that or my brain just doesn't work that way in thinking about it. But I'm sure it was the combination of all the things that we had done before, way back in the day, you know, that created to get to Blast, and then from Blast all the way through to get to whatever we're doing with the Blue Coats now. You know, it's accumulation of information, inspiration, and curiosity.
Yeah. Well, I just remember just the field layout, John. You know, the way that orange ribbon went around, just tilted the field. To give you a bit of an idea, I studied graphic design. I went to Goldsmiths College, University of London, for 4 years and studied design here, and that just blew me away. It's just such a simple thing that no one had done before. People had used tarps on the field, but no one had really messed with the box. No one had messed with that grid, you know. Just that one, almost like, it was just, to me, it was like graphic design into drum corps. You know, just one small element that obviously we used throughout the show that just, it was that little bit of innovation, that little bit of genius that the
well, I can speak to that idea if you want for a second. Is we had this great music, and we had an idea where we were heading with the corps, I think we had Vince by then. We had Vince. Anyways, there was all these kind of things we just wanted to try, and things that Jim and I had been able to experience in our theater world, and now drum corps, thanks to Vince and other people and Aaron Beck and stuff like that, we were able to actually do on the field. And like, wow, wouldn't that be cool? You know what I mean? Imagine the audience experience of that kind of thing. So we had all these things going on, but we didn't really know what the show was up until I think April. It was kind of laid out. We knew the props, stuff like that. We were just on a phone call and Jim was talking about the music, and he just, honestly, it goes like this. He goes, I don't know what to say. It just sounds like it's tilted. And then I heard that and I go, oh my God, well, there's the title of the show, Jim. You know what I mean? It's funny how that stuff happens. And then from that, all the ideas kind of come and I go, exactly what you're talking about. I just go, we all go through this. We look at our box that we perform in, and we're getting better and bigger and making our box include the entire arena. We're trying to do that nowadays, right? It's like, well, what's one simple thing that we can do? And I get these kind of inspirations from Mike Gaines. He's in my right corner. You know what I mean? The one simple thing that you can do that all of a sudden everybody just, go, oh, how about that? And that kind of triggered that, it kind of, well, why not? We're so used to this box. We're doing a show tilt. It shouldn't be perfectly horizontal or perpendicular. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? So get rid of the old rules, and what would it be? And that's how it came up. Kind of simple, actually.
Yeah, and there's actually a question now come in on the chat function here, John, as well, just asking where the idea for the props came from in that tilt show as well. I mean, I guess it's almost like you mind mapped everything around that idea of tilt. So
yeah,
explore.
Yeah. Well, we had started exploring, props the year before with what do you call those things? The risers, or we were doing a parade show. Anyways, and it kind of evolved to well, what could we do that's simple? Because those were not simple to move around and we could get on top of, and really wanted to start exploring vertical height. You know what I mean? So that's what led to that whole thing. And you go back to my Star 93 days, the shape that was that thing, that Kandinsky thing was a scalene triangle. So I have no doubt that's where that came from. I was like, well, I know that this does this. And when you put it up here, or when you lay it flat, it's so low, there's like, it has so much opportunity in it. You know what I mean? One simple shape can create so many different ideas, so that led to that. Does that answer that?
No, absolutely does. Absolutely does. And I was going to come on to, we've talked about this collaboration and these wonderful people that we work with. I was also wanting to sort of get into tonight a little bit about the influence of Winterguard. We've talked about it so much tonight. I'm thinking of Enwood Marquis and Pride of Cincinnati and Escapade, all these guards. I believe Rick Sabal was in Enwood Marquis as well, wasn't he? I think. Yeah, as well.
Yeah, he kicked a rifle across the floor. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm thinking to you, Michael, and I've been a massive fan of Pride of Cincinnati over the years. Just if I'm going to stay up through the night watching the webcast, which lots of Brits often do, it's just something about Pride I just love. A lot of all the guards, your Santa Clara and your work with them, John. But some of the work you've done with the props in recent years, Michael, is kind of mind blowing, really. And some of the questions I had tonight, and I'm sure many of our audience. So not only the impact of Winterguard scene maybe on drum corps, but also just this evolution of the use of props, really, and how, back when I marched in '96, it was kind of a backdrop, with these huge blue props that moved a little bit around the field. They were enormous. They were made of steel, not aluminium. They weighed a ton. They took down power lines coming in and out of the stadium, and they took us about 4 hours to put away after the first show. But yeah, it's a whole different ballgame now. Thinking of Pride of Cincinnati, last winter and whatnot, and what you did previously with the rotating props, and what Blue Coats did there, with downside up, just mind blowing. I had to go and look at those props actually, John, when they came out, those ramps. I think I went over about half an hour just looking at how they were made, because it was just a work of art in itself, So maybe start off for yourself, Michael, and that influence of Winterguard and what you do with Pride, and how that has, generated ideas for the Santa Clara shows, especially in recent years.
Sure. Yeah, well, like I said earlier tonight, I came from kind of the indoor color guard background, and I've always maintained a huge passion for really, all the divisions in WGI. I love even more so than outdoor, I think. I love the creative process and that intimate level, you know. I think that, you know, and as you said, or someone said earlier tonight, that they recommended people get experience indoor if you want to write, you know, on the larger scale. And I fully believe that. You know, when I marched, just watching Sal Salas push people around in the gym, I was fascinated by that. And that really affected me as well. So if you know, on a smaller scale, I think it's easier to do some experimentation, you know, more so than when you have 150 people in front of you. You can still do it, but you know, in terms of efficiency, it can get a little much. But I do think that, you know, when the whole indoor world, WGI started, you know, that was an offshoot of everything that was happening in drum corps, right? They took it inside. And I think, you know, gradually over time, I think the roles reversed, where you started seeing more of the innovation and creativity happening first inside, indoor, and then being transferred onto the larger scale, you know, when you can. And so I think, you know, the evolution of props is the same way. And even some of the qualitative things, whether you're talking color guard or, you know, percussion, those kind of things, I think that the indoor scene helped to push, you know, the outdoor scene in ways that the outdoor scene had originally pushed the indoor scene. You know, I think there's a synergy there for sure. When it comes to the prop thing, you know, I guess the best way I can describe it in terms of what we're doing now at Vanguard, you know, after I left Cavaliers, it was important to me to take that break to kind of, I don't know, find a new, I don't know if it's a new voice, but a new way of saying things. You know, I wanted to not make the same movie over and over again. And so, you know, a lot of the experimentation I did during those years were all indoor. I guess probably in a similar way, like John, that you took time away and did your, you know, with the blast and worked in the theater, those kind of things, to just find different ways of doing things that still are just as accessible to the audience and just as enjoyable for the performers. With the props, and this goes back to your conversation with John a few minutes ago with just the versatility of a simple shape and how many ways you can use it, right? The same thing that, you know, when you were talking about the Pride props from last year or whenever, it was one of those, I mean, it helps to have someone like Jeff Herr, who's a mastermind at creating these props. You know, so, you know, he can take one of your sketches on a napkin and actually create the thing that will hold, you know, 20 people on it or whatever, hide equipment, et cetera. So that helps a lot. But I think that the goal is to have something that is a part of the show. The prop is not just there as a prop. I don't know if that's making any sense, but an actual character in the show, or something that continues to evolve throughout the show, continues to be useful, continues to allow you to create with it, on it, under it, you know, what a million different ways. And so I think that that's what you have been seeing the last number of years, both indoor and outdoors, is people trying to find different, because everyone's going to be playing their horns, everyone's going to be drumming their drums, everyone's going to be spinning their equipment. So people are trying to find these different ways to differentiate themselves, to create moments that no one else is creating, or to get the verticality, you know, especially when you're in the giant arena, just trying to find different ways of creating uniqueness. And I think that's probably where a lot of the experimentation with the props is coming from.
I certainly found, listening to Tom Onkst's calls, he did lots of the percussion calls, of course, and I kind of went through a system of the old guys, and he was on there with Ralph Hardiman and those. But the very last call really intrigued me, because it was Sean Vega, Tim Fairbanks, you know, talking about Rhythm X and what those guys have been doing in the indoor drumline world. And it kind of inspired me to watch a lot more. Not that I'm not a judge. I don't write for indoor drumline, so I don't perhaps watch it online as much as I perhaps should. But it really inspired me to go back, because some of the creative things they're doing is just mind blowing. I know you guys know that from judging and being involved, you know, in the writing scene there. But certainly you're seeing so much of that also coming through now. I do think there was an element of John coming in with that Tilt show and then beyond with Bluecoats that have sort of almost just driven us forward just decades, really. You know, when I think back to what drum corps was like in '93 versus relatively recently. Yes, it's changed, it's evolved, of course, but the evolution in this last 5 years is just mind-blowing, really. So I don't know if anyone else wanted to speak about that. I certainly see, Richard, in your shows of Cavaliers, like I say, I'm a big fan of. I can see that influence that you've had from marching band, from Avon, so especially your use of props and whatnot.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I would start with indoor too, though. I would start with winter. Even just to the point that when I was starting at Avon, just as a foot guy, my introduction to really being able to design was Leon and Daniel saying, "Hey, man, I know you've never done winter guard or whatever, but just come to our practice and help us clean feet and watch us do world-class winter guard." Or Jay Webb saying, "Hey man, come help me with this world-class indoor drum line and just start writing body or start writing phrases." And that just opened my lens from here to here. And so I really am a believer, similarly to what Michael's saying, is that influence of what WGI has done, in turn is now pushing the outdoor thing. And yeah, I mean, certainly, I think what Michael said about the props, the evolution of props, being something, an integral part of the show, being something that can evolve, being something that can be interactive. John, your story of the '96 cadets props are hilarious. The backdrops that just knock over.
Some hilarious stories, believe me, when the wheels fell off and we had to go out there with no props, just wandering around. But
I really am a believer that it really did. And for me personally, and I think for our activity, it has come. And it is, it's that ability to create on the fly with a smaller group of people and to maybe not be afraid to make mistakes. Like, man, if you're writing for a huge band, you got to get so many things right on the page the first time. You better make sure those mellophones and the clarinets are in the right place. And you better know how it happened, 120 counts ago. But when you're in the winter, you're with a smaller group of people, you're a little bit more in the laboratory. And even though winter guard specifically, that's not my strength, but I make sure that I stay involved with it to learn more. I learn when I go stage in A-Guard in Cincinnati or in Northern Indiana, I'm learning every time about, oh, that's different than I thought it was going to be. And it's that application. It's one thing when you think it in your head and you put it on pieware, but it's a totally different thing when you start working with individual talent skill sets. And so, it's funny, I'm mostly involved in drum corps and band and winter drumline, but I make sure that I do winter guard because I always tell people, if I was a baseball player and I was really good at everything except hitting the curveball, that's winter guard for me. So I better make sure that I practice hitting the curveball or I don't have a spot anymore on the team, right? And so I make sure that I look at all what these guys do in the winter. Yeah. And I really am like, well, I'm never going to be that good, but I can work on my craft in a way that helps me on the football field. And so I think that the WGI indoor piece is just I would call it now the most important piece of influencing what we all do. I mean, we certainly have the roots to the old thing, but I think that, you have to stay on that train. And that practice, it's really practice so much more when you're in that gym with only 20 kids. You just get to do so many more different things than when you're on pieware with 250.
This is an interesting question, Richard. I'll get Leon back involved here maybe as well. Anyone else that wants to answer this? A question on the chat. It says, could the panel say a few words about dots versus uncharted staging or charted transitions versus choreography transitions? How much is known early season versus how much is on the fly? So I'm intrigued by this, because I talked to Jeff about, Crown's show last year, and he, early season, he was through the opener, about to get into that incredible ballad they had last year. But I know that Jeff went out on the field a lot more during that piece to get it staged with Rick. So again, just opening up to the floor, really. Maybe Leon first, talking about the dots versus the uncharted and staged and how that works, really.
Yeah. Well, it's a little different when you're talking about a marching band drill that you're sending away and when you're talking about a drum corps drill. I mean, when you're sending a marching band drill away, it's got to at least work out of the box. You can't send a marching band something that's not going to work, especially if you're not going to be like going to any rehearsals. So, there is that element that you've got to be able to make sure that what you're doing works. Now, I think nowadays with writing drum corps drill, you're always going to set yourself up for some organic opportunities. And, sometimes that's just, knowing in your head that, yeah, those 24 trumpets are going to hold over there for 64 counts. But we have this idea where we're going to create an idea that's going to mesh in with the color guard. And, so a lot happens. I mean, the structure of getting the drill out is, what's going to happen early. And then, that sculpture is going to grow throughout the season. And, I think, at the end of the day, people are going to understand more about where they are on the field relative to their environment. Maybe they are rather than a dot on the page. So, I think the dots are a great thing to get you started. But then, as we go through the summer, it's all created because it's, there's hardly any marching anymore and it's choreographed and, we're putting in some of the pauses on our own that weren't even originally written. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but basically, the dots kind of get me started, but then from there, we're going to turn it into something and make it more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to yourself, John, maybe, discuss some of the work in the Beatles show last year, that whole opening sequence, I'm guessing that was written in such a way where you're there with Jim Moore, knowing what you're going to do with the choreography there, the way the horns were picked up, the way they started on the ground, etc., etc. Just a very intriguing and powerful first minute of the show there. How much was that on Pieware and how much was that just notes, really?
That started, well, I knew I charted where the horns were.
Yeah.
That was it. That was all that was in Pieware. Everything else was just done on the, you know what I mean? Yeah. I wanted to make sure it was a pretty arc, way better than I could eye it. Let me just say that. You know what I mean? So you got to make sure the horns are pretty and all that stuff there. And then everything else after that is the ideas that we have. But I can't do those ideas in Pieware.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't a drill based idea at all.
Yeah.
So I didn't try to force that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to answer that question. The questions are coming in here about how we then write, collaborative approach when you are writing. How does our creativity change, perhaps, when you are writing for a marching band that you have to send that drill off? Does it change? I know that maybe Leon, you've just touched on that yourself. When you're sending off a drill, it needs to work. It needs to be right. It needs to be in Pieware. Everyone needs to be able to understand the dots and be able to teach it. So, can that change, in terms of your creative approach to things? Richard, maybe?
It's all about, to me, if you're going to talk about all the different genres, you got to know what kind of car you're driving.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you're driving a Ferrari, sometimes you're driving a Ford Fiesta. And you got to know but you got to know how to set those people up correctly for their situation to be most successful, right? So for a marching band, most of the time, you're going to do more of the detailed work to get them to the right people in the right place, the right talented color guard kids in the right place, or at least set the guard people up to have a little flexibility. But if you're doing if we're doing an Avon or a Cavaliers, I'm charting the guard all the way through the show, but I'm also handing it to Daniel and the Cavaliers guard staff in their case, but in Avon specifically, and saying, well, the guard, I've given it a logical progression that leads the eye to the right place and has a smooth transition, but we have a world-class color guard. We have a Ferrari. So, and you're driving the Ferrari, Daniel. So I'm just going to let you, you're going to figure out who goes where to get the solo toss in the right place, or to get the way we want the organic thing to come in with all the great dancers that Jennifer's going to choreograph. You know what I mean? Or I'm sure John has the same experience that he might set something up for Carol in the years that he's done stuff with her. And so there's a part of it that it really depends on every project, who you're working with, and to know, and you have to have a relationship and a familiarity with the choreographers too, to set them up for what they know how to do. So it's different for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of questions coming in around this same kind of topic, around this sort of creative approach, how much is on Pyreware, how much isn't. But I think, yeah, it absolutely depends, doesn't it, who you're writing for, I think, as well, and what time, how much time you are spending with that group as a designer, I guess, as well. In the winter, you tend to you're there at the rehearsals, you're sculpting, you're out on the floor. I've not written as much Winter Guard as you guys, although I write for Mayflower A Guard. So Michael Shapiro writes for the World Guard, and I write for the A Guard at Mayflower. Have done for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. And I enjoy that process. It's so different. There's no Pyreware. I just go, the floor, design the floor, paint the floor, or whatever we do with that floor, and the silks is a part of the process, isn't it? And I guess that is what has come, over the years out into, the full activity here. I'm going to kind of start focusing on some years here now, go rewind a little bit, if that's okay. I've got some questions, Michael, around those years with Cavaliers. At the time, around 2000, 01, 02, 03, there was so much talk of the collaboration then that you had as a full staff. I talked to Bruno Zuckler a lot about this, actually, when he came to Cadets, and he just spoke of this kind of sort of this game-changing period of time where if you needed, it's just been said so many times, I know, on discussion groups and whatnot, but if you needed more counts, the music was written to visual and back the other way. I don't know how much of that is true. Maybe you can talk us through that now. I've heard it so many times. I'd like to hear it from yourself. And how was that, those early 2000s with Cavaliers and the design approach, really?
I heard one summer the whole drill was done first.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Stop it. I thought that rumor finally died. How does that? Okay, well, those years, I think part of where that came from is that we had the luxury of having a composer actually composing our music, right? We definitely dove in, at least starting in 2001, 2000. But anyway, well, either way, whether Richard was arranging or composing, we had some of those. And yeah, there were moments where if I had an idea, I could talk to either Richard or the percussion guys in advance and say, I really want to try this. And because we were writing all the I was writing the music, because they were writing all the music for the shows, they could incorporate that in. So there was that freedom for sure. The rumors that were always, I think it was mostly that I would write the drill first and they would write the music to the drill. Never happened. We tried early on it was going to be 2001 where I was going to write the movie and Richard was going to then, create the soundtrack for the movie. And I realized really, really, really early in the process that I couldn't do it. It was just too much of a blank page, where do you put the mellophones when you don't know who's playing? It was just weird to me at that time. I mean, I might be willing to try it again now and see what happens, but at that time it was weird. So early on in the process, I was like, Richard, we can't do this. So we came up with, that was the 4-corner show. So each corner would have its own personality. So he could at least be writing the personality and then I would write from there. But yeah, there were certainly some effects here or there where I would be 8 counts short or something, and like, can we have like a little drum fill or whatever. That certainly happened. I think that happens with everyone in every drum corps, and anyone who says it doesn't is lying to you.
Yeah,
but never happens, Michael.
Oh, come on! Vince puts in some Chewbacca sounds and
never.
But
I feel like, yeah, in this kind of era, again, going back to John, the sort of influence of the blast and what you did there on the stage, and watching Bluecoats in this last 3 or 4 years, how much influence do you have on the music? I know you write music. I know you've written a lot of music. I don't know how much how much you influence the music score at the Bluecoats. The soundscape, I should say. I don't even feel like calling it music anymore. So, if you could talk us through that, sort of 10, 15 years on from what Michael describes, what is that audio-visual approach?
Well, I think if you talk to the music guys, they would say that I'm really involved in all that. Yeah. I'm trying to make sure that they would actually say that, and they would. Like, usually there's most years where I'll put the cut tape together and I'll splice the music together. And then I don't know, I speak their language. You know what I mean? I'm sure you guys will know when you get on those calls and it's about measure 13, beat 2, that C, it should be a C or a B. Those are conference calls, design calls, they call them. And all you're talking about is that stuff. But anyways, but they kind of speak my language. And for me, I don't write anything until I get till we start spring training. And what I'm doing up to that point is just absorbing all this kind of stuff. I don't even remember what you're asking me. I'm sorry. Yeah, so yes, I'm heavily involved in the music for sure.
Yeah. It takes me back to, I say, some of those productions in Blast where you wrote the whole music score. Everything. Is it the colors piece? All of that was kind of your music score to that, and it's quite unique to have that kind of approach where the whole thing is your creation. It's not. You don't see it very much in DCI, especially.
Well, yeah, I was just lucky. I just have had some wonderful opportunities. I never set out, I think it was Mike Gaines that said it, I never set out to be a drill designer or visual ever. There was never a dream of mine. It just kind of happened. And then maybe like you guys, you found out you're pretty good at it. And then you kind of like it, and all that kind of, or I think it was Jeff that said that. All I ever wanted to do was to write music. So I've been lucky. I've been really lucky with the people I work with and the places I've been that I am able to do a good amount of both of those things.
Yeah. That's rare. It should be noted. I'm lucky enough to work with Dean Westman, so I know what the influence that John has on their music, and that's rare. John's talent for putting together a large-scale musical thought that will also lead to great audio-visual moments for a whole show. That's pretty rare. I went to music school too. I didn't make it. John made it.
Whatever. Thank you, Richard. That's kind of you. Mostly it's just fun.
Jeff touched on it earlier. I've written 3.5 minutes for the Cadets show of I guess 2021 now, and it sits there. It's on this computer I'm talking to you through now. But I can't possibly
let's see it.
Could you play that for us?
Come on, let's see it. Let's go screenplay that thing.
International debut right now.
Yeah,
International Pretend Drill Day.
Yeah.
Share my screen. Make sure you share system audio too. Here we go.
Yes, yeah. Jeff scared the life out of me tonight by saying I had to be better than Mark. I had to be better than Mark when I started writing drills. So Jeff will, over this winter, I've kind of said, I've done 2 minutes, and he'll be, I'll send it over. And I can't send it to Jeff without every text box being perfect, and every measure and interval, and the change interval, because I know what Jeff expects, if that makes sense. But an integral part of that, and all of our design calls on the Monday nights we have, is just Jeff's unbelievable knowledge of the music. He's a consultant at Cadets. He's a Carolina Crown drill writer, but he knows the Cadets score inside out. Sometimes better than the guys that wrote it almost. He'll be telling Jay Bocook where certain things are, which is mind blowing. It fits into what John has just said. It fits into what Michael said there. Really, that's something I've learned so much from over this winter time. And of course, I was a musician. I was a trumpet player in the corps. But I don't think when I talk to people outside of the bubble, I guess, also in drum corps activity, I don't think they realise just how good, for example, a musician Jeff was. I know that both Jeff and John were lead sopranos at Cadets. Both phenomenal musicians.
Sadly, Jeff was better. And really, Jeff, it's taken me to today to admit that.
Come on.
No, I was I mean, I was solid. I was
Hey,
way better
Leon,
archer
Leon
without
and I
doubt.
were proudly third.
Here's a funny John Vanderkoff story. So like 12 lead sopranos, right? So like, they're kind of sectioned out. So we're on the one end. So John was awesome. Like he used to come out and he used to say, hey guys, this is how we're going to set our feet for this direction change, right? So I mean, great information. He was that guy that was going to do that. But I always kind of like egged him on and says, that doesn't work up here. Go back down to the end of the line.
Such an ass.
Only good fun. Come on.
Yeah.
So tell me as well.
Guys, I hung out with you and Sherry and Trevor.
That's right.
They had a car.
And
That's
Gooch.
awesome, right?
Yeah, totally. That's right. Oh my God.
So tell me as well. I mean, I'm intrigued now actually because I'm not going to show my drill, but Jeff has always talked about staging of the instrumentation. Of course, mellophones are playing. To look at the score, know who's playing, who's the lead. All of those things, getting the right place in the field, and a lot of the drill evolves because of that. Getting the musicians in the right place in the field. So I guess, how much has the activity changed with amplification? Do we need to do that anymore? Do you need to do that anymore? Judges, the way they're now off the field, how have we changed for judges being on the front sideline for percussion, for example, getting them up to the front sideline? Does it matter anymore that the mellophones are front and center when they've got a feature? Can they be in the top left-hand corner, mic'd up? I don't know. I know we've seen some of that. I'm afraid, John, I'm coming back to you on this because I think you've probably explored this more than anyone in some of the shows of Bluecoats over the last 3 years. Look at the ballad that you had with the whole horn line in the back corner facing away. I guess that was the classic, almost communicating to everybody that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know, if you'd like to comment on that. Really.
Yeah, but I just don't think of it as a negative thing. Like all these things, we're just trying to find another cool effect to create a show and to affect the audience, and you talk about, does it change the I don't know. I don't really think about the judging part that much of it. I figure we got to do what we do and we're going to figure the rest of that stuff out. I'm sure everybody on here agrees with that statement, right, guys? You know what I'm saying? So does it matter where the mellophones are? Of course it does, because whether they're amplified or not amplified, they're going to play better if they're together. If you put them on a microphone in the back corner, it's going to be a different kind of sound than if you just have them up front playing acoustically. So if that's the sound you're going for, do that. You know what I mean? If this is what you want. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, just do what's right for the show and for the idea. And you'll know when you get in front of an audience. Most of us have been here long enough that we'll know as soon as we hear or see it, whether or not it's an idea that's worth pursuing or not. But definitely when you get in front of an audience, you can tell if you've connected with them. You know what I mean? Then yes, it's a win, and we'll figure all the other stuff out. Otherwise, back to the drawing board. And believe me, there's a lot of those too.
Yeah.
Well, don't you think that? Oh, go ahead, Richard.
I was just gonna say, it still matters no matter where they are, because you got to look at it.
Yeah.
Got to make the audio visual connection. It can't just be random. You've got to intentionally know that's the primary.
Yeah, I mean, composition is composition. Whether or not you have amplification, whether or not you have the electronics, and really having those assets, I suppose, in your palette for every advantage that they bring, they cause exponentially more obstacles to overcome. Whether that's through timing or what, yeah, you can have the mellophone's mic back there, but if your snares are in front of them, that gets really weird. Although, their sound could come out of the speaker ahead of the snares, depending on how you have them. Like there's all these, Brubaker had a way of saying, what was once a jigsaw puzzle is now Rubik's Cube. I don't know, what's the next evolution for Rubik's Cube? That's where we are now, or, you have to be careful about going, past a mic too close now, that it's going to pick up the trumpets going by when someone, there's all kinds of things that, but it's fun, that's the fun part. I mean, it's a pain in the butt, when you realize there's a problem, but figuring those things out, with your colleagues is part of the magic,
Yeah, it really is. Like, the way I just think about what Richard was just saying, the focus is the focus. And I don't know. I always think about this because sometimes you hear things on tapes or whatever, and I don't know what to look at, and it's just different now. It's like of course, in theater, center stage, down center is still your pocket, right? But how much important stuff happens upstage right in theater? Like so much stuff. Well, we can now do that. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of awesome. So it changes our perspective of what the field is, and how we look at things. Now that area, which is really important, I don't know why. I'm sure there's some science to why upstage right is really important. We can make that, and it can still reach the audience in our venue. And I think that's super cool. So it opens up the world for us. And is it a pain in the ass? Yeah. But I mean, I just think it's cool how we're all adapting and pushing us, and everything's looking different now. And every single buddy here does some things differently. And I freaking love that.
Yeah, I agree, John. So again, I sat in the audience with my family last year, and I just felt for the first time, the entire evening, it was a show. I didn't feel, it didn't feel like drum corps coming on. And people say that as a negative sometimes, or where the uniform's gone, I can't figure out who's who. I just sat back in the stadium with my 4 kids and my wife, and I felt like I was just in this incredible, 4 hours of theatre. And, and as each group came on the field, it was getting better and better. And, and I was enjoying everyone. It's just this one massive show. And I think there's something to be said for that, isn't there? For sure, that, this evolution has just become quite remarkable, really, where it is just, you buy that ticket, and there was back in the day that, I felt sorry for some of the groups where the stadium wasn't full at the start of the evening, back in the mid-90s, I felt for them, that, you'd go in a kind of, but that isn't the case anymore. People go for the entire show. And some of the things the groups were doing last year was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I think you're right there, John.
You know what? I don't mean to talk a lot, but what I love about it is the variety.
Yeah,
the variety. Because back when I marched, there was variety, and I was with Zingali, and he was onto something brand new, and that was cool. And that was maybe a quantum change, but I just feel like we're in this world of quantum. You know what I mean? Like everybody, like I said, everybody here on the screen, and Jay, and all these people, none of us look like anybody, like the same anymore, like each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just freaking, because the possibilities are so huge right now. It's a little like every time it's time to start a show, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's kind of overwhelming, which is fantastic. I'm sure the next generation coming under us are going to be way smarter. You know what I mean? That they're going to, oh yeah, it's just this, it's this and this, But for me, the old guy, I'm like, dang, this is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very conscious, gentlemen, we've been on for 2 hours and 15 minutes now. So it's 3:15 a.m. here. And I feel like I'm just kind of scratching the surface of some of the things that I've wanted to get through. But it's been a really powerful discussion, as I knew it would be. And I'm really hoping the audience have enjoyed it as much as I know we have. And as I said at the start of this, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't talk about the period that we're currently in. And please feel free to chip in, any of you at this time. Many groups and activities across the nation, both in America, Europe, across the world, let's face it, this has brought us all together, COVID. I hope we are bringing some joy. I hope the teachers out there are making sure they realize that their job has shifted from just teaching information to being the gatekeeper of these young performers' dreams. I'm sure all of us remember being youngsters and dreaming of marching in drum corps, winning championships, whatever it might have been, whatever your dream was at that age. I think we as teachers now have a responsibility to keep them ticking over, keep those dreams alive, So I hope tonight, with just a remarkable lineup in front of me, has brought some joy to people that are out there either listening. I've got friends here in England that it's now 3 a.m. I knew they was putting their headphones on tonight in bed and just listening. They weren't able to get up and watch, and some of them will watch it tomorrow. So I think genuinely the activity, we've all got a responsibility here. And there's so many of these webinars going on right now, and online virtual clinics and everything else. So I urge people, one, to get involved and do it. This is not normal for me. I'm an administrator. I'm an assistant principal in a high school in London with 2,000 kids. I'm not a professional drill writer. Denise is panicking now. I'm an assistant principal who I love writing drill as a passion. Drum corps has always been my passion, and writing drill has been a passion. You know, I'm a designer. I love being creative and innovative, but I feel a real need right now to do more of this, to do more connecting, let people in, I guess, as well. You know, let dreams start tonight, as Richard said. You know, a real kind of duty that young people that are performing, that want to be drill writers, actually look at us tonight, or you guys especially, and realize I can do that. You know, I can be a Michael Gaines, I can be a Jeff Sacktig, a Leon May, a Richard Hinshaw, a John Vanderkoff, because you've certainly been inspirational in my lifetime, and some of you I've got to know tonight live in front of, I don't know how many people are watching or listening to this. I know it was 5,000 last week. I've got a feeling it's double that tonight. Can actually look or listen to this and be inspired as well, and feel like they know you a little bit more, if that makes sense, you know, from seeing you on the screen. So, you know, I'm conscious of that.
I think it's a great point, John. You know, for me, something that the pandemic has done, this pause, has brought all of this history where we get to stop designing our shows and look back at where we came from. And so I've learned so much from watching all these things that I hadn't watched in a long time, that a lot of these guys, all these guys were involved with. And then at the same time now, like, okay, what now? What do we do now? Because we're trying to survive now. And how do we make our art form or our niche survive, and how do we make it better? You know what I mean? How do we evolve it to be better? And how can we get more people that don't, you know, women and people of color, people who aren't like us, involved in this? And I think it's really important that we say, please ask us for help. We're here for you. And then also, how do we make our organizations better, you know, so that we evolve to the next step? I think there's some cool things happening that you know, looking at how we can survive in drum corps to change it, that are going to be cool and maybe for the good. So I know it's dark, but I think there's some hope, you know, off in the distance.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I really, you know, a big shout out to the educators out there. Obviously the young people that have heard the news today from VOA, but, you know, staff out there, you know, you be different, you know, make sure you stay connected with your students, and like I say, realize you are the gatekeeper of their dreams. You know, I believe that, I really do, because I'm a teacher full-time here for 15 years in London, and that's what hopefully I bring to cadets. I've always felt that. I think hopefully Jeff would vouch for that. I'm a teacher. I don't swear in front of the kids. I don't cuss. I never have on the field at cadets. I don't do that. I'm conscious that the things I say to the kids, they remember. I'm going back to what Leon used to say to me. I've got dot books here, literally here. I'm not even joking, because I had these out last week for the corps. I thought I might need them tonight. Like Leon said how good these were in front of the whole corps in '97. I've not forgotten that. I'm 43 years old. I've not forgotten that. You know, like people that you look up to and the things they say stay with you. And I think there's never been a more important time for our teachers across our activity, drum corps, marching band, winter guard, whatever it might be, that the things you're saying to these kids online, the place that they listen to the most in this modern era of chat and WhatsApp and TikTok, are going to be incredibly powerful. So realize, teachers out there in our activity, that, you know, the things you say during this period are going to have, you know, real lasting effect to these young people that we teach. But I kind of wanted to leave it with that. You know, we've talked some amazing things about drum corps, but interestingly, the email that Jeff sent to us, I'm not going to read it out, but kind of went something along the lines of the thing that we all have in common on this screen is this unusual ability to move people around to music on a football field or a basketball court. You know, quite a bizarre thing really, but you know, the power it has to inspire is, and for this unique ability to work together and be great at something that is bigger than yourself, is why we do this year on, year out. And like I say, in this period where it isn't there for young people, I think we need as adults and teachers to be aware of that, and like I say, and be very mindful of being the gatekeepers of these kids' dreams, like I say. But gentlemen, I'm not going to keep us too much longer. Thank you so much for being on the call tonight. It really is a privilege to be on the screen with just such brilliance, really, and just absolute genius. You've brought so much joy to young people and to audiences across the world. I honestly, I can't Hall of Fames and in every activities and countless world championships, like I say. But when you think about it, I hope you'd agree with me that it is just giving young people the ability to shine, really, is what we all do it for, year after year. And like I say, thank you so much for being on. Jeff Sacktig, thank you very much for putting me up to this.
You did great.
It's 3:30 in the morning and I'm flagging a little bit. I need another coffee, I think.
You're a great host, John, really.
Yeah, you really are.
I have a career as a Zoom host. I mean, you're
I'm no James Corden, but like I say, I grew up pretty close to where he lives.
And he's an awesome drill writer. The 3 minutes he wrote are spectacular. So
yeah. Well, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us, John, when we say congrats on the gig, and we look forward to seeing your voice around for many, many years in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. And John Vanderkoff, it was lovely to finally meet you. I feel like it was like...
Yeah, I feel like we could be really good friends, John.
Who is John Vanderkoff? That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, well, you're a great guy. You're a great guy. Thank you.
But it
Thank
also
you for this
speaks
opportunity.
volumes of yourself, John. Jeff told me just how humble and how great guy you are, you know. So, you know, it speaks volumes, actually, that you are that guy. So thank you very much. Gentlemen, I'm going to sign off. The very best wishes, and I hope everyone out there listening has enjoyed. Take care.
Thank you.
great seeing everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Great seeing you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Lily. Bye, Richard. Bye, Michael. Bye, Jeff.